The Noble Queen, a Shadow Slave Fanfic. Chapter 251 to 275. Noble was actually positive on this point. The world one way or another was about to break in half. If they wanted to preserve human life, the trio would have to act quickly. Just great. They needed to keep people safe from the coming natural disaster below as well as the unnatural disaster coming at them from the air. Oh, and they needed to find the heart before the tyrant arrived. This is insane. Noble's head began to spin. It was too much. How was she supposed to be in 2, soon to be 3 or more, places at once? There was only one option. As much as Noble hated it, they would need to divide and conquer. What do you mean the earth is about to divide in 2? Sarai asked loudly, drawing the attention of the already anxious citizens around them. Word was already beginning to spread about the coming abominations. And with the ground's unpredictable shaking, it would take barely a spark to ignite the tinderbox of uncontrollable fear. As it was, things were already teetering at the edge of chaos. Placing her finger on her lips, Noble then lowered her voice and leaned forward. As she whispered in Sarai's ear, she transmitted the same message to Nickel through the memory. Both sets of eyes opened wide. That can't be possible. Sarai stifled her gasp. Are you sure? Nickel asked in a subdued voice. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm positive. Noble glanced aside, keeping her voice low. If I'm right, this place is about to be split in pieces. We have to move people north, out of the city, or at least beyond the palace. Sarai, that can be your job. The redhead looked more concerned than if her friend had said that Sarai should solo the tyrant. I can't, she muttered, defeated. This is not a time for can't, Nickel pointed out. It's do or die. Though if it comes down to it, I would rather let the citizens die than fire. Noble nodded. As much as she didn't like the idea, at the end of the day, the 3 of them needed to survive more than the fake people of the nightmare. But that didn't stop Noble from also wanting to save as many as possible. She was their monarch, if only temporarily. Logistically, many would be needed to fight the corrupted horde heading their way. Mentally, Noble could not make any more compromises. She would do what she thought was right. Taking Sarai by the shoulders, Noble looked deep into her friend's eyes. You've got this. You are the former queen. Most people fear you. They will listen. And if they don't, Sarai pursed her lips. Then you have a secret weapon, don't you? Noble looked at her meaningfully. While you both have your pep talk, I'll go find that jerk of a lapdog. Nickel summoned his black mask around his face and gave a short nod. I'll be in touch. The man picked his way through the broken glass and disappeared into the castle. Why did he insult Kosi like that? I thought he was starting to like him. Sarai furrowed her brow. He was talking about council, though we need to find Kosi as well. Noble blew out her cheeks. There was too much to do. I will drop you at the southern edge of town to start moving people this way. I can look for my protectors while we travel. But first, discarding her cloak and calling forth her queen bee armor, Noble's eyes swirled. At her command, the glass all around her lifted from the ground. I might not have gotten to use this trick on Amira, but at least I can use it now. The startled citizens noticed the floating glass and backed away. It's not safe here. Every available man assembled to fight. All others moved north. The glass twisted around the queen, giving her words ominous weight. The sight was enough to tip people over the edge. Women and children began to flee, while nearby soldiers rallied to her plea. After a moment, Noble placed the glass in a neat pile in front of the palace. At least this way, no one would get cut on the debris. The soldier who had initially brought her the news of the incoming attack waited nearby, still awaiting orders. Shall I blow the warning horns, Your Majesty? Noble blinked at him as her jaw dropped open. Why have they not been blown already? Noble waved off her question. Yes, sound the alarm. Assemble the troops. The fight for Crestfall has begun. The man's eyes opened wide. He bowed and ran. Noble turned away from the chaos. Are you ready? Sarai hesitated, looking at the people beginning to flee northward. Biting her lip, she nodded. I want to help Crestfall. They deserve a fighting chance. Let's go. Noble wrapped her arms around her friend's waist from behind and hoisted her from the ground. They lifted into the air with ease. While Noble could have simply used her levitation to help Sarai soar through the air beside her, it would have meant splitting her attention between too many things. The floating awakened was not only trying to get her bearings to head south but was also searching for any sign of Council's emotional signature. She had been silently looking for his presence as soon as they left the tunnels but had yet to lock onto him. Noble grunted in frustration. Am I too heavy? Sarai tried to shift her weight while she dangled above the ground. What? No. You are light as a feather. I just can't find Council and it is driving me crazy. Noble wanted answers. Do you think he is dead? The redhead wasn't sure how she felt about that prospect. Noble hummed softly. She remembered the shifting shadows in the red light of the heart's chamber. Someone had been there with them but had managed to avoid her detection. I think he is alive. Maybe he is still underground. If I have time, I will check the tunnels. Time was not on their side. The horns of warning finally sounded, throwing Crestfall into a true state of panic. We are under attack. The is barrier gone. What will we do? Below, people burst into a myriad of activities. Some barricaded their homes while others wandered aimlessly in the streets. Head north. Don't stay here, Noble called. Both women yelled at those they passed, with mixed results. Finding an open plaza near the edge of the city, Noble lowered herself and her companion beside a large fountain. Releasing Sarai, Noble gave her parting words. Don't spend too long here. We will need you for the battle. Noble winced. Maybe this is a bad idea. You don't have to do this. You don't trust me? Sarai asked seriously. I do. The queen answered. I'm just worried about you. Same, Sarai answered, taking a step back. Stay safe. Noble nodded. You too. And whatever you do, don't fall in the hole when it forms. Don't worry. Go find Council and Kosi. I will be fine. Sarai's words were in contrast to the turmoil inside. She forced a smile. Go. Reluctantly, Noble took off, leaving her friend behind. Part of Sarai wanted to call her friend back. She could fight all day long, but talking to people publicly was a whole other matter. And people were already staring at the unpredictable former monarch. Some with curiosity, some with fear, and others with open hostility. It was someone from the last group who spoke up before Sarai could get her composure. Tell us what is going on, former queen. What did you do to anger the gods? Sarai froze at his words. They think I am to blame. Suddenly she wished that she had left with Noble after all. Sarai blinked at the man blankly for a moment. Her heartbeat pounded in her head while she searched for an answer. I didn't anger the gods, she managed. But her timidity only made the accuser bolder. Oh, then who did? Sarai gulped. This wasn't going well at all. More people joined the first in expressing their displeasure and fear. Why is this happening? What's wrong with the barrier? Is the Lord of the Mountain really coming to destroy us all? When she didn't immediately answer, their emotions quickly turned to frustration. Why are you just standing there? Have you come to see us all die? The crowd surrounded Sarai, pushing in. As the soldiers had all gone running toward the horns, there was no one around to defend the former queen. This is all your fault. Someone threw a stone, barely missing the redhead and landing in the mass of humanity behind her. Shouts of indignation answered the lobbed projectile. The words around her became violent. Soon the words would turn to action. The crowd had become a mob. Sarai knew from her time in the Dreamscape that it only took one or two loud voices to turn a cheering crowd into a jeering crowd. It was unlikely that all of these people actually harbored resentment toward her, but they needed someone to blame. And Amira is an easy target since she is no longer queen. Likely none of them knew exactly what their former monarch was capable of, or in their sudden swell of emotion, they no longer cared. Sarai's emotions were going wild too. The urge to flee was irresistible. It would be easy for her to escape these mundane humans and leave them to their demise. The ground shook, temporarily stopping the mass of humanity from taking hold of the Emerald Queen. The ground. Someone lamented. The old queen caused cracks in the earth. How dare you? The redhead was responsible for many things in her life, but seismic activity was not one of them. She needed to teach these people a lesson in manners. But then a child cried out among the onlookers, her tiny voice echoing through the square. "Mommy, what do we do? Are we going to die?" Hearing the frightened words, Sarai doused the flame that was forming in her hand. Yes, the child was about to die. At least in the original timeline. Most of the people around her probably perished when the original conflict happened. Could Sarai really make a difference this time? The fiery woman clenched her fists, her jaw set in a determined line. "I can try." Her eyes filled with determination as she summoned two memories. The first formed in her hand. The beautiful gilded bauble spoke of authority and might. The strange scepter might not help her to find the right words, but it would help amplify anything she found the courage to say. The second memory materialized across her shoulders. The beautiful cape was covered with interlocking shapes that seemed to move in and out of one another in an endless maze of color. It was entrancing. The Mindweaver's tapestry was given to Sarai by Snowmobile as a gift. Its description had always made the shy baker reluctant to use it. A mesmerizing, intricate tapestry woven from threads that seemed to shimmer with a life of their own. Each thread in the tapestry represents a strand of thought, showcasing the complexity and interconnectedness of the mental landscape. A parting gift from an admirer. Let's hope these people will become my admirers as well. Sarai took a deep breath. Keeping both eyes on the crying child, Sarai ignored everyone else around her. "Don't worry." Sarai spoke. Through the scepter, her voice came out loud and clear. On her shoulders, the golden threads in the tapestry shimmered as her words seemed to ripple through the air. While the anger of the crowd did not dissipate, Sarai could see the anxiety on people's faces lessen. Her anxiety did as well. "They didn't immediately maul me. That's something." She tentatively continued. "I don't know who angered the gods, but it doesn't matter. The earth is going to open and swallow you whole." The panic she had just calmed doubled tenfold. They had felt the world quaking below them. And it was more than just the regular shuddering that the mountains sometimes sent their way. "What can we do?" A woman cried. "Save us, mighty queen." A man begged, hoping his supplication would not fall on deaf ears. Only a few still resisted the pull of her words. Sarai decided to ignore them. Everyone must get to the north side of the city as soon as possible. Those who can fight, get a weapon. Those who cannot, take shelter after you pass the palace. Sarai felt her memories echo and enhance her words. That is what one of the tapestry's enchantments did, enhanced the words of the speaker to make them more persuasive. The crowd froze, fraught with indecision. Some believed her wholeheartedly while others were less confident in their previous beliefs about the Stoic royal. Only a few still harbored the anger of a revolution they did not get to enact. She met the defiant looks with determination of her own. A screech sounded, breaking the tension of the moment. All eyes shifted from the ground to overhead. Sarai looked too. Her expression darkened. A single flying abomination swooped down over the city, ready to capture some delicious human prey. Its hungry fangs glistened with anticipation of flesh. Coming in from the south, the corrupted being was not part of the tyrant's horde. It was merely a bottom-feeder opportunist. Yet it would suffer the same fate as all others that opposed the fiery former queen. With a sigh, Sarai lifted her hand and blasted the creature with a ball of flames. The monster hissed as the smell of charred flesh filled the air. Before the abomination could get anywhere near the people, a second immolating blast hit it across its hideous skull. The dead mound of flesh and bones crashed into a nearby structure, crumbling it. "What are you waiting for? The barrier is broken and more are coming. Move." Sarai wished Noble were here to emotionally jolt them into action. The tapestry seemed to understand. It flashed, blinding those closest to her temporarily. A woman gathered up her child and ran northward. "Let's go." Others began to follow until only a few rebels remained to oppose Sarai. Even after the display of power, they were aching for a fight. She shrugged. Some people just didn't want to be saved. Before they could get any ideas about trying to harm her, Sarai sent a spray of harmless sparks in their direction. "Shoo! Go fight the monsters or each other." Leave me alone. The Mineweaver's tapestry glowed softly as Sarai's eyes lit with flames. The revolutionaries looked confused for a moment. It was only when more sparks lit fires under their shoes that they finally fled. Sarai walked away from them unharmed. Dead men walking. I tried. The ground rumbled like the groan of a sleeping giant. More cracks formed in the ground. Sarai quickened her pace. The tapestry billowed out behind her as she hurried through the streets with her message being spread far and wide by way of her scepter. Both salvation and doom were located in one direction. North. Noble floated over the city, searching for any sign of Council or Kosi. She tried not to worry about Sarai or Nickel. The others will have to take care of themselves for now while we gather the forces and prepare for what was coming. Noble told herself. Get north. Those who can, prepare to fight. Those who cannot, seek shelter by the north wall. The queen would do what she could to keep the battle away from that area. It would be even better if they could get out of the city, but funneling so many out of a narrow place would be creating a choke point for the corrupted abominations to exploit. There was another problem. Getting the civilians out in the countryside would leave the women and children unprotected. Noble glanced northward toward the mountains. The sky was becoming even more clouded with monsters. Helpless humans out in the open would be too tempting of a target for corrupted creatures to resist. It was better for them to remain hidden. But where? Not underground. The earth was ready to burst. Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Nothing new. With death coming both from above and below, the only thing to do was fight. And survive. The first was easy enough, but the second would prove more challenging. In the end, it would all be worth it if she could feel Fort's arms wrap around her one more time. The thought of her husband invigorated Noble. Get north. She repeated her plea to fight or take shelter. I can't find him. Nickel's frustrated voice blasted into her head as she passed above the palace. I've cleared out most of the palace staff and a handful of the lingering nobility, but that idiot and your feline friend are not here. I cannot find them either. Either Council is no longer in the city or he is evading us. Noble furrowed her brow as her eyes swirled. She had sensed Council's emotions almost constantly for the past couple of months. Though she couldn't say the exact moment they left her consciousness, she could feel the absence of them keenly right now. Where was he? Have you seen General Theo? Noble asked through her memory. Last time I slipped by him, he was dividing his forces between the search and the city's defenses. He was having to make some difficult decisions. I don't think anyone knows exactly how to prepare. Nickel's voice trailed off. You have a suggestion? Noble could hear his hesitation. Nick countered her question with one of his own. Is the tyrant coming for sure? It had been many minutes since the last time Noble had searched the horizon. She shifted her gaze and let her ability rest for a moment. From the mountains, the horde was growing dangerously near. In their midst, a dark shape hid nearly unseen. But Noble knew it was there. It made her shiver. He is with them, she confirmed. Then we should just fight him. If we defeat him, then we no longer have to worry about the heart. Nickel stated. The floating woman felt herself fall a few meters through the air before catching herself. But without the heart, we have no way of controlling where the tyrant will go, or what he will do. We don't know what having the heart would or would not have done. It's your call, but I think we need to move on. Sadly, what Nickel said made sense. They were wasting time with no results. Precious seconds were being wasted. Noble sighed. Go join Theo and apprise him of what we know about what is coming. All of it. I will do one more sweep to warn people and pick up Sarai. Then I will join you. Nickel grunted. See you soon, Noble. The final turn around the city was brief. Most people had either gotten the message or decided to ignore it. There was no real need to address either group. Finding Sarai, Noble came beside her to offer her another ride. You can fly faster without me. Sarai rejected the chance to take to the air. I'll be there soon enough. But, Noble looked at the cracked ground with unease. The redhead flicked her hand dismissively as she ran. Go. Be queen. Reluctantly, Noble left her friend behind to continue the run toward the palace. She rose to get a look at the city kingdom. There were preparations of all kinds happening. The military was forming into ranks while scared civilians sought to shore up any shelter they could find in the northern part of town. Suddenly Noble's eyes stopped swirling as something caught her attention. Kosi. Noble smiled. In the distance, the golden creature was bounding down from Crestfall's north wall and racing toward the palace. Her happiness turned to confusion. On his back, a figure rode like a knight in shining armor. The polished metal reflected the sun even through the quickly forming gloom. His sword was in the air as he bolstered those around him. He paused briefly before a ragtag group to give instructions and then continued on his way. As counsel finally came within her range, she could feel his emotional signature. He felt triumphant. Nickel, I found them. They are coming toward you. Diving, Noble flew to intercept the pair as they reached the palace entrance. Counsel must have seen her coming because he had already dismounted before Noble was able to land beside him. Your Majesty, I have done it. He beamed as he bowed. And I am so glad you are here to witness it. Confused by his words and excitement, Noble furrowed her brow. Where have you been? And what have you done? The words spat out like an accusation. Confused, Kosi tilted his head, backing away from counsel to stand behind the queen. He didn't want any part of a disagreement between friends. Counsel's ecstasy dampened for a moment. He clasped his hands in front of him. What have I done? I have been enacting our plan. I told you I would make myself indispensable, and I have. Together we can rule. After today, there will be no need for your aunt or anyone else to help us run this nation. We can do whatever we want. Noble blinked. She could feel a resurgence of his strong feeling towards her. This time he made no effort to hide them. Oblivious to her concern, the blonde man smiled brightly. Yes, my love. I have followed your messenger around. He is a fraud, merely a low-level criminal that you had the compassion to free. Which means there is no man who has your heart. You can drop the act. You already had my affection, there was no reason to make me jealous. I know now is not the best marriage proposal, but I will do better once this is all over. You found the heart and broke the barrier. Noble changed the subject. The current line of thought wasn't giving her anything but a queasy stomach. I know. I have solved all our problems, the man beamed. Was Pen one of those problems? The floating awaken's eyes misted as she remembered the poor servant's face. Pen was a solution. I told her we needed to get a hold of one of the sets of bracelets and she found a way to make that happen. I didn't mean for her to die. Counsel defended himself. His emotions spiked. It was a liar, at least a partial one. Counsel didn't have access to the books that told Noble not to touch the ball, but he must have known the action was dangerous, or he would have done it himself. You used her. Noble felt like retching. It is my fault. Hadn't Noble pushed them together to remove Counsel's affection from herself? And he had taken that misplaced love and used it to his advantage. Pen gave her life to a great cause. We will make sure to give her a heroine's funeral. The handsome soldier dipped his head. What do you think, Brenna, should we name our first child after her? Counsel, you have gotten ahead of yourself. Noble's cheeks flamed. The man frowned. At least call me by my name. You have hidden behind titles for too long, my love. Have you forgotten? Noble gritted her teeth. I have not forgotten. Noble had only figured it out that morning. Even now she didn't believe it. Her face darkened. Your Ender. My sweet Brenna. The look in Counsel's eyes made Noble recoil. His acknowledgement of the name only confirmed what she already knew. She looked away to the pile of shattered glass. It did not just resemble the stained glass in her room at the Citadel. It was one and the same. The caverns and tunnels below the kingdom did not just resemble Ender's Deep, they were Ender's Deep. Or what Ender's Deep was before it broke apart. The rubble which Noble had visited a handful of times in the dream realm was in fact the ruins of Crestfall. The professor had never considered that prospect because there was already a gate at her citadel. Another was impossible, wasn't it? Yet she could not deny the evidence before her eyes. For whatever reason, the spell treated the land above and the citadel below as two different nightmares. This nightmare was before the one where the government saint had inhabited Ender's body. In that one, Ender was rebuilding a world after the south side of the kingdom was torn apart. That meant the fissure would be formed in Ender's lifetime. And if Noble's intuition was correct, it would be formed much sooner than that. Ender, please. Noble pushed back the revulsion she felt from his longing look and tried to reason with him. We have to return the heart and protect the city. The tyrant is on his way. There is no time to lose. If we hurry, maybe we can get the barrier back in place and still meet the tyrant before he arrives. Remember our plans. Your plans, Ender patronized her. This plan is much better. I have found a way to use the heart. My master's book has a spell. It will work. We will never have to fear an attack by anyone again. The greed in the man's eyes was chilling. The only person he wants to protect is himself. Noble took a step forward, trying to keep her face neutral. Where is the heart? Counsel's hand flexed as he lifted his arms. He's going for his sword. Instinctively, Noble summoned her estoc. But the man simply opened his palms and revealed something even more harrowing. The heart. Don't worry. It is harmless now that it is out of the cave. Counsel cooed. But with my sorcery, I am able to turn this into the perfect weapon. The man held a black ball lightly in his hand. Nearly imperceptible strings of light pulsed across its tenebrous surface. It cannot be. Resting in Ender's palm, the portcullis key reflected her face back at her from its inky void. No, it wasn't the key. It was the key before it became the key. Or another gift from Ariel that looked exactly like the key. That seemed less likely. No, the portcullis key had brought her here, brought her back to itself. What in the spell? Noble's head spun. There was too much information to process and not enough time. Focus. There would be time to sort through the convoluted insanity later. Right now, she needed to stop the coming calamity if she could, and the key, her heart was her best shot. Please, Ender. Put it back, for me. Noble reached for the ball, but Counsel pulled it away. The blonde protector frowned. Everything I have ever done since we met was for you. I have let nothing stand in the way of your future. Not your aunt, not court politics, not even your parents. You were always meant to rule. With me by your side. The last words were unspoken, but Noble heard them just the same. However, it was the part just before that which Noble found more alarming. My parents. They stood in my way. Noble felt the man's guilt, but instead of invoking compassion, it filled her with dread. She swallowed. The tyrant didn't kill Lord Bizes and Lady Alora, did he? You did. The words were barely above a whisper. Your parents did not think we were a good match. They said they doubted my affection. But really, we both know they still thought of me as a pitiful slave that they graciously freed from bondage. Counsel spat the words out bitterly. Noble blinked. The scales of blindness fell from her eyes, and she saw Counsel for the first time. Not from the tainted lens of Brenna's misplaced loyalty or Noble's own desperate need to have an ally when soloing a nightmare. But really saw him. Counsel had killed Brenna's parents. Murderer. That is what Amira had called him. She must have suspected his treachery but had been unable to prove it. With this realization, other pieces suddenly clicked into place. The poisoned cup that first night. Counsel had bumped the table to keep her from drinking it. It hadn't been a fortunate accident. It was an intentional move to save her after failing to assassinate the queen. But that was not all. Droon, the head librarian, had not told Amira about the book Noble had taken. And Noble had been wearing the fraudulent facade when she escaped from and returned to the palace. The only person who had both of those pieces of information to tell the queen was the man before her. He sabotaged me. Would negotiations have gone differently without his interference? It was hard to say, but Counsel had made sure the meeting would fail before it began. And he had gone forward with the rebellion without her permission. Before, Noble had dismissed the error as overexuberance, but now she realized it was a willful disregard of her desires. How many other things had her protector done behind her back during this nightmare? The world felt turned on its side. I trusted you. That was the problem. Counsel had told her that she was too trusting. The paranoia that she had in the waking world had not translated to this ancient time. What I did was for the greater good. For your good, Ender assured her. Noble felt something press upon her senses. It was similar yet different from the pressure she sometimes exerted on others' emotions. Noble pushed aside the thought that maybe counsel was right. Stop that. The queen raised her sword. Stop what? Using my aspect. I thought you would be pleased that I've finally unlocked its secret. Ender smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It seems I will have to keep working to convince you. Noble tensed. She had no desire for another mind attack. Her expression hardened. Give me the heart. We must return it now. Brenna, Counsel moved toward her with his arms opened wide. Amira's bracelets slid down his wrists from beneath his armor, shimmering from proximity with the heart. Stay back. Noble had no intention of letting the man anywhere near her. The unlikely end hissed with energy, ready to cut off Ender's hand to regain control of the dangerous orb. Around her face, the visor of her black and gold armor wove its way to cover everything but her eyes in its protective shield. The mighty helmet graced her head, ending quietly in a purple plume. Give me the heart and my aunt's bracelets too. Noble's eyes swirled as she leveled her weapon at Ender's throat. I will not ask again. Counsel sighed before clicking his tongue. Poor Brenna. Don't you see? You are too late. It has already begun. The bracelets. Noble gasped. Ender looked down as the gold bands continued to glow softly. Helpful little things. They give so much power. I understand why your aunt was so attached to them. Counsel circulated his essence, and whispered a few words. The tenebrous heart pulsed in his hand. Wisps of darkness began to sift through the outer membrane of the ball. The ominous mist floated up to Counsel's face and circled it. The man's eyes clouded with darkness before clearing. Inhaling the smoke deeply through his nostrils, he smiled. Nickel, I'm not sure where you are right now, but, help. Noble dashed forward to dislodge the ball and stop the sinister process Ender had begun. Whatever happened, Noble could not let him be successful in his quest to control the tyrant. Sensing the move, Ender evaded her attack. You don't want to fight me, he said calmly. The words almost rang true, but Noble silenced them before they could take root. This is madness. You have to stop. No good can come from what you are trying. She tried to lift the ball from his hand, but Counsel tightened his grip. Under the pressure, haze poured from the ball like water from a sieve. Ender was enveloped in ominous darkness, yet he remained calm. Trust me, he crooned, his voice silky smooth. The words coiled around her like a snake, yet somehow she slipped through their grasp. Trust you. She barked a laugh. Never again. As tempting as his communication was, her mind was not going to fall under his control. Her emotions were too strong to be swayed by his honeyed words. Two can play at that game. Noble sent a strong wave of confusion towards him. She needed to break his connection to the spell he was casting. Or at least his concentration. But the smoke around Counsel seemed to protect the man from her machinations. He easily resisted the battle of invisible wills. Blast it! Switching to her second sight to pierce through the dark smoke, the queen dashed forward. Striking twice more, Noble's blade went wide first before hitting against the armor with the return stroke. Although she did not catch him with the tip of her blade, the hit clanged against his shoulder guard. Before Noble could follow up with an upward slice towards his neck, Counsel kicked his metal boot against the stomach of the woman he claimed to love. The sudden force overcame Noble for a moment and she went down, brushing the seat of her armor against the ground before she could regain her flight. Pain surged up her spine. She screamed. A blur of golden fur jumped between them. Kosi snarled at Counsel, protecting Noble with his body. The large creature had been confused by the strange interaction between them. They had many sparring matches, but never outside. The queen's scream finally spurred him into action. Sweet Brenna, did I hurt you? Counsel's voice was filled with curiosity but not concern. He stepped to the side only for Kosi to block his path a second time. Get out of my way, you foolish Simkus. Ender ordered. Kosi faltered, looking at Noble with a dazed expression. He stepped aside with a whine. Counsel's powers of persuasion were confusing to the young demon. When exactly had Ender mastered his aspect? Was it this morning when he convinced Pen to take the heart? No, Kosi. Noble begged. We have to get the ball. We have to stop Counsel. Stay. Council glared at the demon. It's for your own good. The Simkus struggled for a moment and then sat as if forgetting his previous thought. Kosi, listen to me, please. Noble tried to break through the mental barrier, but it was no use. Prodding the creature's emotion only got a concerned look from the beautiful cat-like eyes. Noble was wasting time. Time she didn't have. Once again on her own, the queen lifted Council from the ground. The thick smoke became solid, sticking to his skin like tar. The sight was startling, but it did not stop Noble from shaking the man to try and dislodge the ball from his hand. The sorcerer chuckled. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Put me down or I might drop this. From his armor, Council brought a familiar vial. A small drop had eaten away the bulk of the garden courtyard. How much of the city would be destroyed by the whole container? Noble continued to dangle the man in the air. That is for the Lord of the Mountains. We won't need it when my plan works. So I may as well dispose of it now to free up one of my hands. Ender smiled congenially. If he broke the vial, Noble could stop all of the droplets from reaching the ground, but then what? Her mind raced, trying to discern all the possibilities. Where were Nickel and Sarai? Surely they would have an idea. Part of her wanted them to arrive immediately. But what if Council could persuade them like he did Kosi? That would give her opponent easy hostages. A whisper of fear made its way into Noble's consciousness, but she shook her head. No, Nickel and Sarai were not that weak. They were allies, not liabilities. Hurry. Oblivious to her thoughts, Ender was already chanting the next part of his ritual. This was different than using true names. The power fueling the process came from within Ender and the bracelets on his arms. The sky darkened overhead. The horde was almost here. Ender glanced toward the coming cloud, and Noble saw her chance. She lifted from the ground and raced at him with her weapon. He twisted his head at the last moment, and the ESCTOC raced across his cheek, creating an angry, sizzling gash. But before the unlikely end's enchantment could take hold, the cut on his face was already being sewn shut with tenebrous thread. In Ender's hand, the heart continued to pulse, growing visibly bigger and smaller with each beat. No. Noble's eyes opened wide. She could not stop her forward motion fast enough. Council welcomed her advance with open arms. Gripping the vial tightly in his hand, he ran his fist down her arm forcefully to knock the sword from Noble's grasp. In all his sparring with Noble, Council had mostly played defense. He had become very skilled at deflecting and changing the angle of Noble's hits. Because he had not wanted to injure Brenna and incur Amira's wrath, the man was an expert at absorbing Noble's strikes and using that momentum to keep them both safe. Now he used that same skill, but for a slightly different purpose. After disarming his opponent, Council wrapped his arms around the queen's chest. With a twist, he shifted their speed into a downward spiral. Keeping the ball and vial out of reach, Ender pinned Noble's arms as he hugged his body against hers. The breath was forced from her lungs. When her body seemed close to breaking, Council pressed his knee against the queen's chest to throw her to the ground. Unable to slow herself in time, Noble's back hit the courtyard before she could buoy herself again. With a groan, she scrambled away from Council, who landed on his feet beside her with a contemplative expression. Sweat poured down Noble's brow as her vision blurred. Very interesting. Council regarded her as he stoked the heart. Noble dismissed her estoc and summoned it again, but it would be precious seconds before the weapon materialized. She righted herself. Her head ached. Smiling darkly, Ender approached. I never would have thought the ground was your weakness, but here we are. It seems I don't need to destroy the earth, I just press you against it. Don't. Noble had hit the earth twice, but only for short amounts of time. She had built up enough immunity to recover from the contact, but not if she kept being subjected to new pain. Ender came close, ready to test his theory before the queen's strange sword could come back into existence. Brenna had more power than he previously thought, but she was also more fragile. If he could keep her subdued until he was through with his transformation. A roar interrupted his thoughts as a body collided with his own. Ender barely avoided the teeth that accompanied the newly regrown mane. Stop it, you fool. Council pushed as much essence into his words as he could, but there was none to spare. The process he was undergoing was taking its toll even with the bracelets. Kosi roared again, his massive jaw opening wide. Noble didn't need a translator to know what the Simkus was saying. How dare you hurt the queen? Council tried to defend himself with his words, but they fell on deaf ears. No matter how convincing Ender's aspect could be, for Kosi, injuring Noble meant death. He pressed his paw against the offender's face and prepared to rip the man in two. The heart. Noble hurried forward before Kosi swallowed the tenebrous ball along with the traitor holding it. Get back, you stupid whelp. Council screamed. Noble made it halfway to her goal when a tinkling sound of glass cut off Kosi's sound mid-growl. Only it wasn't the heart that had shattered. It was the vial. The Simkus staggered, turning to face Noble with uncomprehending eyes. His mouth foamed. Drool dripped from his mouth and sizzled against the ground, eating a small patch of earth. Kosi whined softly, then fell to the dirt. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Kosi. No. Noble rushed to the Simkus's side in a moment. Already the teeth and inside of his mouth were coated with the disastrous poison of Council's creation. More foam fell on the ground, making a hole around the creature's furry face. It was self-defense. Ender screamed. He was defending me. Noble's face grew red with indignation. Stay with me, Kosi, please. Kosi groaned and spit up more vile liquid. The ground around him was quickly disappearing. So were the rows of sharp teeth in his mouth. It's no use. Ender turned away, clutching the black heart to his chest. You have to move him before the ground collapses entirely. He pointed to the pile of broken glass. Another earthquake's rumble reluctantly forced Noble into action. With great speed, she arranged the glass into a makeshift bed on the ground before laying Kosi on top of it. And just in time, the place where he was cracked and caved in on itself. The earth was beginning to crumble. But Noble didn't care. The whole world could fall apart right now as long as Kosi survived. He should have listened. Ender's words incensed Noble. You should have listened. She shot back. Everything is falling apart because of you. Noble held back the tears in her eyes. Hold on, she told Kosi gently. She turned away, her eyes swirling like two hurricanes. She would avenge her faithful friend and protector. The estoc in her hand gleamed with the incandescent light of the essence flowing through it. You! She screamed a second time. But before she could take down the horrible human, something more horrible shrieked from behind. Attracted by the smell of coming death, the first of the corrupted abominations dove from the sky. Noble turned in time to see the monster seeking to gorge itself on uncorrupted flesh. The flying creature had no cargo like it had during the last battle, which is why it was so much faster than the bulk of the horde. Up close, Noble could see a humanoid figure trapped beneath the stretched skin of the pallid abdomen. It ducked its head, diving toward Kosi with blinding speed. But it never found its mark. Guided by Noble, the unlikely end sailed through the air without its master. It plummeted deep into the abysmal creature, barely slowing down to deal the devastating blow of its enchantment. The flesh melted away like butter as the creature did not even have time to scream. You have slain a dormant beast, soaring sentinel. Noble paid the voice of the spell no attention as she continued to guide the estoc on its path of destruction. The next target would be another beast, Council. As if anticipating the strike, Ender cried out. The whites of his eyes clouded with darkness as he gripped the heart in both hands. The ball pulsed as the pounding became audible. Then, about the time it looked like it would burst, it disintegrated, releasing tenebrous more wisps of smoke in every direction. The formless darkness snaked up Council's arms and then filtered into his nostrils. He gasped, clawing at his chest. A burst of power flew out from Ender, blowing dirt and debris in every direction. The shockwave hit Noble like a wrecking ball, knocking her back. The glass around Kosi shattered into a fine mist, covering him with a fine powder. Kosi closed his eyes, his body convulsing from the impact. But it was the unlikely end that suffered the most. As Noble was closer than her memory, she was hit with the wave a millisecond before. Her focus was disrupted, causing the estoc to turn tip down as gravity took hold. So when the percussive force slammed into it, the whole of the weapon suffered. Small cracks formed on the metal surface of the blade and the handles. The memory was breaking. No. Noble dismissed it a moment before it was destroyed entirely. The memory returned to her soul sea for another day, but it would be of no use to her right now. She summoned the ruby tear in its place. Noble watched in horror while the new weapon manifested in her hand. Fissures on the ground formed below Council's feet, joining quickly with the others there from the earth's angry rumblings. Ender's eyes remained dark and uncomprehending while he continued to grab at his chest. If not for his armor, the soldier would have torn his clothes to claw at his skin. As it was, the nails on his fingers were becoming bloodied from the effort. Incoming. Noble heard the voice in her head as she sensed a figure in the shadows. She could not see Nickel with her eyes, but her senses told her that he had a weapon like a crossbow in his hands. It seemed vaguely familiar. It was the same weapon he had used on the rooftop against her all those months ago. Nick aimed carefully. Die, you worthless piece of. The projectile flew straight at Council. It hit him directly in the chest, piercing a hole through the armor. But it dissipated as it hit the man's skin. Ender barely seemed to notice or even care. A smirk twisted onto Council's face. He stopped his wild scratching. He looked down at where his armor had been pierced and cackled with maniacal laughter. Yes, he yelled. I have done it. Another projectile followed the first, but it missed as Ender took a step forward. Council's smile faded as the sky darkened. The horde was here, blotting out the sun for their incoming master. The first of the creeping creatures were circling above attached to their flying counterparts. Any moment, the nightmarish cargo would be dropped on the citizens of Crestfall to devour as many as they could. You have done it all right. Noble cried out as the ruby tear completed manifesting. She lunged forward to cut off the man's head, but she never got the chance. Another sentinel dove from the sky at top speed, its claws outstretched with talons of steel. The sentinel scooped up Ender and lifted him into the air, shaking him mercilessly as they went. No. Put me down. Ender reached for his sword to slay the wild beast, but the abomination's wild flight made the task impossible. Using his brute strength, he pried open the creature's claw. Council fell a short way through the air before being caught up by another of the flying creatures. The first two sentinels were joined by a third and then a fourth. More swarmed, each trying to get their hands on the man who now possessed the heart of their lord. One of them alone might not have posed a huge threat, but the volume of creatures assaulting Council with tooth and nail was overwhelming. On the ground, Noble and Nickel were completely ignored as every available flying beast clustered around Ender. No, but it was too late. As one, the sentinels took to the sky with Council in the center. Higher and higher they went until they were indiscernible from the rest of the horde overhead. Council shrieked, then went silent as he fought for his life. It was a losing battle. It didn't matter if he was torn apart or died from the catastrophic fall. Barring a miracle, Ender was gone. What are they doing? A captain squinted at the unnatural cloud. After dipping down momentarily, the deranged creatures now circled overhead in a frenzy. For a moment, the world below was eerily calm. Too calm. I think they took something up with them. But what could be so interesting that they all went crazy like that? A palace guard answered as much to himself as the man beside him. The captain shivered. I don't want to think about it. You too. Where are you supposed to be? Theo snapped at the soldiers. Frustrated, he kept moving without waiting for an answer. Those go over there. Don't get in a neat little line. Make it harder for the creatures to scoop you up, blast it. In the plaza nearest to the palace, the general did not waste the inexplicable opportunity by staring at what he could not change. He used every blessed second to rally the men into the best defensive formations. Things had moved far too quickly for his liking. First Council had been wrapped up in the theft of a priceless artifact, then the barrier was discovered to have failed after over 100 years, and now the tyrant's horde was gathering for an assault. To top it all off, he was having to change the plans he and the Queen had painstakingly made. Since the battle was supposed to take place outside the barrier, Theo was quickly adjusting his methods to protect the citizens and attack the corrupted monsters. Things could not get any worse. In the respite before the storm, he tried to prepare for the new obstacles in the ever-changing field of play. "Do we try to shoot them down, General?" one soldier behind a ballista asked as Theo passed. The war machine had been built hastily in the past couple of weeks based on a design from the Queen. However, it had never been meant to be used inside the city, so it sat awkwardly in the plaza adjacent to the communal fountain. Considering the man's words, Theo paused from his orders to glance up at the sky. He frowned. "They are out of range, for now. We shouldn't waste our supplies." Theo glanced over his shoulder and his voice became sharp. "Are you two still gawking? This is your life at stake and mine too. Get your head on straight." The dressing down had the desired effect. The captain and guard snapped from their reverie to continue their preparations, wary of the turmoil overhead, but steeling their nerves against the coming battle. Satisfied, the general barked the rest of his orders. Everything was set. With nothing else to be done, Theo checked his armor, taking a last peek at the sky. His eyes quickly darted toward the palace. Was it his imagination, or did he hear a human scream above the fluttering of wings? Dash! Kosi! Noble pulled her eyes from the sky to run toward the golden Simcus. Using her gauntlet, she brushed off the glassy dust from her friend. He was still breathing, but barely. Nickel was at her side in a moment. Most of the poor creature's face had been eaten away, including the skin around his teeth. The black bile left behind pooled in the makeshift bowl beneath him. What happened? He dismissed his protective black mask as he stared in horror. Council poisoned him. Noble spat bitterly. "What do we do?" "Noble. Nick." Sarai hurried toward them. Her face was filled with worry. "Wah." Council put a spell on the heart and fused it with his body. He was attacked and taken into the clouds, but not before he poisoned Kosi. Nickel spoke quickly to apprise Sarai of all that had occurred. "No." The red-headed woman held her hand to her mouth as she saw what had become of the faithful protector. "Sarai." Noble's heart filled with hope. "Quick, your memory." The other woman held out her hand and a very different vial formed on her delicate palm. Sarai opened the container, the one that helped defend against indigestion and poison, and immediately dropped it into what was left of Kosi's mouth. How long should it take to work? Noble was becoming frantic. The creatures overhead would not be satisfied staying in the sky for long, and all three humans needed to join the army and be ready for battle. But none of them could tear themselves away from the hurting creature. "I am not sure. I think it would be pretty immediate, but I've never taken it after being poisoned that I know of." Sarai felt her emotions spiraling out of control. The drops of healing from the vial bubbled before turning as black as the rest of the putrid poison. It didn't work. Noble's breath hitched. How could it not work? It isn't a high enough grade memory. Sarai furrowed her brow. No. Noble refused her words even though they were undeniable. It has to work. How could she fight without Kosi? He was supposed to battle by her side in the final conflict. While Noble knew she would have to say goodbye, it wasn't meant to be like this. It can't be. Noble sheathed her sword and patted the Simcus. "You are going to be fine. We will figure this out." She could feel Kosi's emotions become more distressed. The creature choked. His breathing became labored. He convulsed, spitting black liquid from his mouth. He whined as he caught a turbid breath. As the poison dug deeper into the creature's body, blood mixed with the putrid foam. "He's not going to make it," Nickel whispered gently. Noble took the vial from Sarai and poured more drops into what was left of Kosi's jaw. This time the black foam devoured it immediately. "Noble," Sarai grabbed her friend's arm gently. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry." Kosi whined again, his voice weaker than before as he shook. Noble pulled her arm away from her friend's grasp. "I cannot leave him like this." Her protector was dying. How could she let him do it alone? Overhead, the mood shifted. The creature's frenzy became more pronounced. There was no time left. The Simcus's agony radiated from his body, piercing Noble with each new sadness. She wanted to help him. Stop his pain. Kosi looked at her and whined softly. His eyes were clear and still. The request in his marred face caught Noble off guard. She staggered back. I cannot, she told him. The Simkus coughed as more blood and blackness spilled onto the glass bowl around him. He looked at her again, this time more frantically. His eyes flicked up at the sky and then back at her. Noble understood his fear. How hideous would it be for the abominations to eat him while he was still living? He was defenseless against them. Noble could not protect his body fully while fighting the tyrant. More than that, Kosi deserved better than the indignation and agony of this slow death. He had gotten her through this nightmare, saving her life twice. There was no way to make it up to him. Kosi growled weakly, begging her for one final favor. Her heart sank. How could she refuse? Noble patted the creature's side. His heartbeat was erratic. Each pump struggled against the poison inside him while also allowing the ruinous venom to claw deeper into his core. Noble swallowed back a sob. Lifting the ruby tear, she placed it lightly between two of Kosi's ribs. The queen wanted to be anywhere but where she was, even if that meant battling the tyrant head-on by herself. But deep down, she knew she could not abandon her furry friend in his time of need. Are you sure? Noble wanted more than anything for Kosi to absolve her of this burden. To take the request back. To release her from his plea. Please tell me to stop. But Kosi nodded with a groan and rested his decaying head. His eyes closed as he tried to hold still. With tears streaming down her face, Noble plunged the sword into Kosi's chest and directly into his heart. She felt his final beat. Her own heart nearly stopped with it. Kosi's eyes reflexively opened wide with a jolt of pain, then they shut for the last time. Strangely, Kosi's last emotion was one of peace. His muscles relaxed, and his body went still. Noble pulled out the bloodied blade and lowered her head. Rest well, my friend. You have slain a transcendent demon, Kosi the Simkus. You, Noble. Sarai pulled her friend back. A sentinel came plummeting from the sky and into the spot where Noble had just been. But it was already dead. Noble stared at it with a dazed expression before coming to her senses. Thank you, Nick. Wasn't me. Nickel lifted the two blades which had manifested in his palms. Neither of them was bloody. The queen's face paled. Well, if it wasn't you, and Sarai was busy getting me clear, then who? Noble dodged as another humanoid bat came hurtling toward the earth. This one was alive, but not for long. Sarai's spear finished manifesting just in time to pierce the creature through the abdomen. She flicked the nuisance aside. In the distance, other sentinels began to drop their creature comrades over the city and then dive toward the palace. No matter how poisoned, the flesh of a transcendent demon was still irresistible. We have to get out of here, Noble motioned them away from the palace. She rushed toward the closest plaza. The abominations would die from the black foam, so there was no reason to fight them. It was better to defend the citizens until the tyrant made himself known. In the corner of her consciousness, Noble could feel the same oppressive force that she had on the day of the hunt. The Lord of the Mountain was drawing near. In answer to her thought, lightning struck the ground in the distance. The source was far off, but Noble knew the flying tyrant could travel at an otherworldly speed. Now that the sun was all but blocked out and the barrier was disabled, the ancient king would finally have the freedom to come and annihilate anyone who opposed him. Or so he thinks. Noble spotted Theo just as a shaft fired from the ballista. The mundane projectile wouldn't do much to protect against the awakened creatures or above, but it cut through the wings of the descending horde before lodging in the hide of something bigger and splintering. The general ordered another bolt to be loaded while he knocked an arrow into his bow. The sudden motion out of the corner of his eye made him aim the bow at the queen before dropping quickly to one knee. Your Majesty, forgive me. Noble waved him off. None of that just now, General. Status. Theo stood. The troops are stationed around the city supported by anyone willing to wield a sword. We have abandoned the southern half of the kingdom. Are you sure? I'm sure that was the right move. The ground to the south is unstable. Noble tried to move them forward quickly. Before she could, Theo stepped in front of her and raised his bow. Identify yourself. He drew back his string. Sighing, Noble pushed up Theo's arm, and the oversized arrow pierced a rock-like abomination. It snarled with needle-like fangs but never got the chance to use them. Sarai finished off the creature before it could hit the ground. That's just Nickel, my friend. You remember him, Noble told Theo. Please don't skewer our allies. Apologies, the general lowered his bow and his head. I did not recognize you under the hood. Nickel clicked his tongue and waved dismissively. Not the first time someone has tried to kill me. He spun around and shot one of his daggers forward. A moment later, another of the rocky beasts crumbled into a fine mist. And it won't be the last. Nickel dismissed and resummoned his dagger. Noble rolled her eyes at the showy display and continued giving her orders to the general. Direct any awakened you see to take on the more powerful creatures. I will be going after the tyrant as soon as he comes. Noble felt Theo hesitate. I know that was the plan when you, Her Grace, and Council were working together. The soldier dipped his head at the former queen as he mentioned her, but with part of that trio missing, perhaps. That is why Nickel is here. He will do even better than Council could. Noble motioned to the black-clad man. Theo regarded the powerhouse with great interest and nodded at him. You have nerves of steel. You'll need that to taunt the tyrant. Nickel nearly dropped the weapon still forming in his hand. I'm sorry, what? Of course, the assassin had known that Council was going to capture the attention of the tyrant, ideally by using the heart as bait. With recent revelations, that plan had probably always been a ploy by Ender to get his hands on the heart for his own ends. So how was Nickel supposed to fill the position of someone who had never intended to complete the task as planned? The dwindling light wavered as more flying creatures joined the fray. These bat-like monsters carried heavier cargo, and stronger abominations. Things were about to get much harder for the awakened and nearly impossible for the mundane soldiers. But Nickel kept his face calm. I'll do my best, he assured the general. Satisfied, Noble dipped her chin. Keep up the good work, Theo. We will see each other soon. Dashing northward, the queen motioned for the other two to follow. How she wished Kosi were here to whisk them all away while they spoke privately. We'll just have to plan on the fly. Touring down a wide street, Sarai and Nickel caught up with their leader. The battle here was fiercer, probably because it was closer to the city wall where the civilians were hidden. Working in tandem, the three expertly wielded their weapons. They became an indomitable wedge with Noble as the head. The three spoke as they progressed. What is the play here, Noble? Nickel plunged his daggers into the neck of a creature that looked similar to a two-legged sheep and pulled back quickly before the creature could close its gaping maw. The head detached cleanly from the spine, sending a spray of fetid blood in all directions. For now, we kill as many of the minions as we can until the tyrant arrives. The less ammunition he has to throw at us, the better. Deep down, Noble knew that the tyrant probably had close to inexhaustible forces. But until he made his grand appearance, they had to defend and preserve the human forces from total destruction. That's all well and good, Nickel observed Sarai and Noble tag team an awakened beast. The former pushed aside the slashing claws with her estoc while the latter burned a hole through its middle with her spear. The creature collapsed in a charred heap. But what do you want to do when that thing gets here? We are running out of time. Nickel was almost right. They had already run out of time. But not for the reason any of them thought. An explosion in the sky seemed to rip open the heavens for a moment. At the same instant, lightning snaked toward the ground and simultaneously streaked toward the hole as if it could sew up the seam with electric thread. The world lit up with daylight, startling the abominations used to working in darkness. Seeing their chance, the humans cut down as many of the dormant and awakened abominations as their weapons would reach. All except Noble, who looked up at the sky. Her face paled. Clear the street, now! She screamed. For the hole was not made by a parting of the masses overhead. It was made by a mass of creatures falling free from the horde. Like a comet, they plummeted to the ground. Aimed right for Noble's head. The street was blown apart by the impact. People and nightmare creatures who could not get out of the way in time were thrown into the surrounding buildings. Noble flew free of the impact, bringing Sarai with her into the air. Nickel fled in the other direction, unwilling to be lifted like a rag doll by Noble's powers. He ran toward the coming danger. Laundry. Sarai couldn't see what happened next in the dust, but Noble could. Her extra sight allowed her to track the mysterious librarian. At the last moment, Nickel leapt onto the falling ball of flesh and scaled the mass like a set of perilous stairs. He cut and stabbed the abominations he passed until he jumped off the other side and onto a rooftop on the opposite side of the street. Even when the building crumbled, Nickel safely maneuvered himself to the ground. "He's fine," Noble told Sarai. "I can sense him and he isn't in pain." The same couldn't be true for the others around them. The collision shook the ground and collapsed yet another part of the cracked earth. Most of the city block lay in ruins with bodies of humans and creatures crushed beneath the white stone. Some of the falling monsters died in the impact, but the others lifted above the newly formed crater and swarmed. When they cleared the hole, Noble could sense a lone figure left behind alive. The emotional signature was powerful, human, and familiar. The queen instinctively lowered herself and Sarai to seek cover. Noble's voice could barely be heard over the chaos. "We have a problem." "Oh, Brenna." A sing-song voice echoed loudly through the ruins of the street. "I'm home." As the dust settled, a figure climbed out of the crater and stretched his arms. His armor was battered, with a few pieces missing entirely. The exposed skin was completely covered in inky, dark veins as a crooked smile made its way across the man's face. Even though Noble was hidden mostly behind rubble, the man's eyes trained on her location with ease. They were filled with darkness. He tilted his head. "Since when do we hide from each other? Come out and see." Ender opened his arms wide, causing the small swarm of flying creatures to speed up their circular motion. The sight was nothing short of harrowing. Not only had Ender survived his trip to the sky, he had come back stronger. The power emanating from him was not just due to the bracelets he still wore. Council had undergone a fundamental transformation in the sky. He was now a master. After ascending, Ender had not only broken free of the tyrant's minions, he had subjugated a small swath of them. Was this an extension of his aspect or a new ability that he had just gained? Whatever the source of his power, Council suddenly had a small army at his command to fight both Noble and the Lord of the Mountains. And as long as he could keep stealing from the Lord, the Master did not care how many he lost in his quest. Noble stepped out from the shelter and leveled her gaze at the man. "I am right here." A cruel smile crept onto his face. "There you are. Did you miss me?" The queen's expression darkened as she lifted her blade. Council's warm smile turned sour. "No, you didn't miss me, did you? You know how I know. This heart has the power to discern truth. You've never loved me, have you?" Ender moved toward her with measured steps. "I was barely more tolerable than a pebble in your shoe. And now you hate me." Noble's blood ran cold. It was like he was reading her mind. What he said was true. Council had manipulated and coerced her into starting a revolution. He had killed Brenna's parents, tried to murder Amira, led Pen to her death, and Kosi. Yes, she hated Council. Ender's cruel smile returned, but it did not meet his eyes. "Very well. If you will not live and love me, you will die hating me. At least I will know the last strong feeling in your heart was for me alone." He lunged toward her, and all of the abominations came with him. The queen's eyes went wide. She shoved Sarai away from the attack. "Run!" Flying away from the crater, Noble led the chaos back toward the palace. Before she could engage the master, Noble needed to draw him away from the fighting. If let loose on the world, Council and his crew would cause casualties on both sides of this battle. Coming up on the main square where Theo was in command, Noble tried to warn the general of the incoming danger. "Theo, watch out for." But her warning was drowned out by the wings of the sentinels. They followed their leader like a canopy of fluttering leaves. "There's my favorite general." Ender's voice was full of mirth. "And his little army." Feeling Council's murderous intent, Noble turned around before reaching the palace. "Don't hurt them," she ordered, picking up and sending a mundane sword flying toward the deranged master. "It's me you want. How right you are. Leave us." Ender's voice boomed. "The heaviest fighting is north. You must go there." Theo, who had drawn his sword to fight the human enemy, seemed confused for a moment. When his eyes cleared, he lowered his sword and nodded. We are needed elsewhere. All troops go north, he ordered. Under the pressure of the suggestion, Noble saw the army start to disengage. Council's minions assisted them by placing their bodies in between the soldiers and the beasts not yet under Ender's influence. The square drained of humans, leaving just Ender behind. Sarai and Noble slipped away southward, hoping to put a little more distance between them and the human army. But they didn't get far. Lightning crashed at the edge of the city. Noble covered her ears as she hurried. The tyrant, Sarai yelled when the sound stopped. He's nearly here. I know. Noble answered over her shoulder. There wasn't much she could do at the moment. They had a more pressing problem. Almost there. Just as they reached the other side of the once glorious, partially cracked castle, a strange bubble of corrupted beasts formed around them to block their path. The world became even darker than before. A man strolled leisurely through the swarm with a satisfied grin. There you are, Your Majesty. Your Grace. You have made it just in time for your funerals. Ignoring the taunt, Noble looked past him, making sure that no others had been caught up in his trap of abominations. Ender seemed to read her thoughts. Don't worry, Your Majesty. None of those people will die by my hands until after I have subdued the Lord of the Mountain. I have Crestfall's best interest at heart. Ender tapped his chest as he chuckled. The Queen looked at Ender with cold fury. She had decided his fate. Although he had lived many more years in the original timeline, that history would not be repeated. He would die now. Noble gripped the ruby tear and raised it defiantly. The only thing in your heart is darkness now. But not for long. Do you think the tyrant will let you keep that power you stole from him? Never. As she spoke, Noble tried to relax and get her bearings. She wasn't exactly where she wanted to be, but it would have to do. Ender's brow furrowed. Even after all our time together, you still doubt me. I will control the tyrant, and then Crestfall, and then, with this power, I will create an empire that will fear and worship me. Holding out his hand, a ball just like the one he absorbed formed in his hand. With this as my key, I will be able to do anything. In the ancient past, the man would become a great sorcerer. He would be the one to alter the portcullis key to incite fear from those around him. Ender would not only lead the people of the deep but also conquer many lands before inexplicably leaving behind his prized possession for Catfind to find as a recreation in her nightmare. Noble held her head high. Not this time. Counting down the seconds in her head, Noble waited until the last possible moment before planting the ruby tear in the dirt and lifting herself and Sarai from the ground. Then she activated the main enchantment, Law of Attraction. The earth shook as the sky above her ripped apart. Lightning had been coming at regular intervals to mark the advance of the Lord of the Mountain. King Crawley had been traveling at an incredible speed, but also a predictable one. At least, they became predictable once Noble got enough points of reference. Her map skills might have been questionable, but thanks to one of her attributes, her mathematical ability was excellent. That was how she knew that if the tyrant continued on his path of destruction, his bolt would land just beyond the palace. Unfortunately, Noble had not been able to get there in time. Council and his minions had blocked their path. So rather than bring Ender to the lightning, Noble had used the Law of Attraction enchantment to bring the lightning to him. On cue, the streak of electricity raced toward the ground. It headed straight for the ruby tear but encountered the blockade of sentinels first. The tyrant's power was far too great for the beasts. Their thinly stretched skin caught fire and melted before becoming ash. The entire bubble around the humans became an electrified fence for a moment before the charred flesh and ashes blew away in the breeze like they had never existed. Only the creatures, shards remained, dropping to the ground in a crystal rain. Noble lowered Sarai to the ground, unharmed. The ladies had had no contact with the earth during the catastrophic hit, and the tightly packed abominations had made the perfect conductor for the electric bolt. Council was not as fortunate. His knees quivered slightly as the earth shook. His shoes melded with the ground. But the bulk of the energy was taken by the deceased sentinels, and the new master was already recovering his wits. Noble quickly pulled her sword from the dirt and slashed at Ender. But with his newfound strength and speed, he was just a hair faster, leaving his melted shoes behind as he dove out of the way. The ball disappeared from his hand as he hit the ground, melding with his palm like his footwear had become one with the earth. Ender pulled a sword from his side to meet the next blow. It was not his usual blade. He must have picked it up during the chase toward the palace. The two blades met. The ruby tear hit the mundane metal with an impressive clang. Being much stronger than the mundane metal, the enchanted sword sliced through its counterpart like it was made of butter. But that was as far as Noble got. The black veins on Council's skin grew, sealing his body in its inky covering. The ruby tear hit Council's skin and glanced off his exposed shoulder without leaving a mark. Noble staggered back to avoid a wild punch by Ender's fist. He caught her blade instead, but she quickly dismissed it before recalling it farther away. When the queen was clear, Sarai blasted Ender with a large fireball. The man's skin turned red before blackening once more. Council clicked his tongue. 2 against 1. That's cheating. He lunged forward with the broken blade, ready to impale Sarai just above the leather cuirass of her favorite armor. Sarai spun her spear and brought down the tip on the man's breastplate, prying the already weakened metal from his chest. The edge glanced off his skin just like Noble's sword. The tunic below was almost completely torn or burned away. Council's skin shone like onyx. However, Noble immediately noticed a glaring flaw in his usually chiseled physique. The ribs in his chest where his heart should be bulged out awkwardly to make space for the second heart. Unlike the rest of his body, the skin there did not look as hard as rock. It was soft and vulnerable. Sarai saw it too, and sent a ball of flame at his torso. Ender sneered, blocking the damage to his chest with his forearm. Only a direct hit will do any good. Noble circled to the back of Council to try another attack. At that same moment, a new set of abominations dropped from the sky. Geodes and beetles were released by their sentinel couriers to land on the powerful Awakened's heads. Noble turned her blade on the one falling right toward her and sliced through it without missing a beat. You have slain a dormant monster, Crag Beetle. Stay back. Council's words pushed like a command on her senses. The abominations did not have her resistance. Noble watched them become thralls of the master as Council pried them from the tyrant's influence. The Lord of the Mountain must have felt it too, for a groan overhead emanated like thunder. The tyrant's movement slowed to a stop. Now you've done it. He knows you are here. Noble could feel the wind shifting as the powerful creature began to descend. Let him come. Council did not seem bothered. I control his heart, it will be easy to entrance him like the others with my words. Noble doubted this was true. Neither she nor Sarai had blindly listened to him, and they were less powerful than the being overhead. His aspect worked on perception, and the tyrant would consider him a thief. The heart might sway the abomination slightly, but Noble did not think it would be enough. Either way, she could not let that battle take place to see who would come out on top. If Council won, he would have a weapon that could wield untold destruction. And if the Lord of the Mountain won, Noble suspected that he would be able to reclaim his heart. The fierce creature was already almost impossible to kill, but if he was made whole once more, the kingdom of Crestfall would certainly be destroyed, and Noble, Sarai, and Nickel with it. One way or another, Council had to die before the tyrant descended from the heavens. It was the only way to give herself and the kingdom a fighting chance. She aimed her sword at the master with a vicious gleam in her eye. Where are you? Nickel's voice rang in her mind. I'm on the south side of the palace fighting Council. Noble slashed at her enemy, but he batted her blade away with his bare hand. A small chip came out of his palm. That was something. Hurry. And bring a few shiny, sharp things with you. Noble sent the message through their link. I want to give Council the Thane treatment. Nickel grunted. How long do I have? Before the tyrant gets here. Noble calculated quickly. 17 seconds maximum. Got it. The other's voice went silent. Noble struck downward as she sent her final thought. In response, Council lowered his arm, leaving his chest open for a blast from Sarai's spear. His hard skin scraped against the ruby tear as the fireball streaked across the sky. Rather than suffer the blow, Council threw his body against Noble in another attempt to tackle her. However, this move was one he had tried once before today. If there was one thing Noble could claim as a champion in the Dreamscape, she didn't make the same mistake twice. Mimicking the agile master, Noble opened her arms and twisted her body, using her levitation to overcome their difference in weight. While the thought of embracing the madman was repulsive, throwing him into the ground with prejudice was worth the price. She leveraged her weight and ability to the extreme, pulling him into the air before slamming him into the dirt. The coming crash was devastating to the already disintegrating ground, but Counsel simply brushed off the dirt as he climbed out of the hole. That was just as well. As satisfying as the hit had been, Noble did not expect it to hurt the master. She just needed to stall. When metal rained down from the sky, Noble was ready. Nickel had arrived. 5 seconds, not bad. The wraith clicked his tongue. Too slow. It was incredibly fast, but at the same time, it might not have been enough. 12 seconds was not much left to work with. So Noble did not waste what she had. The rain of metal was actually the collected swords from soldiers who could no longer make use of them. The small nick in Counsel's hand that Noble had made had given her an idea. The tiny wound was not much and wasn't bleeding due to the protective black covering, but it did mean that his skin was not impervious to attack. What one nick couldn't do, perhaps 1,000 could. Under Noble's direction, Nickel had shot the weapons into the air like a deadly hail. The first flying sword was easily blocked by the master. The blade flew in an arc before aiming back to its original target like a homing device. By then a second and a third had joined the assault. Drawing deep into her reserves of essence, Noble guided each of the swords toward Ender's dark form. Here goes nothing. Noble's eyes swirled. As Noble rained the attack down on her opponent, she found it was both similar and vastly different from any telekinesis she had done before. The closest she had ever come to trying this particular skill was when painting a wall years ago. Like the brushes, each sword needed to move independently as well as in tandem for maximum effectiveness. In an extra layer of difficulty, all the blades had to hit the right spot on the moving target to do any damage at all. The task nearly splintered Noble's mind with all the calculations and adjustments, but with clarity, she pressed through the pain and remained focused. If Counsel could order nightmare creatures around, she would respond with a small army of her own. And stop him before he gains control of more minions. Already the abominations were stirred into action by her attack on their master. Only a wave of fire stopped them before they could close in and distract Noble from her goal. But even without the creature's assault, the mental strain was too much. Being a quick study was not enough for so many blades. Almost immediately Noble released 5 of the weapons from the aerial attack. The amount of essence she was burning through coupled with her unfamiliarity with so many moving parts, made the floating awakened have to limit herself to only 20 piercing blades whizzing through the air. Each hit was more vicious than the last, and Ender could not block them all. He stubbornly protected his chest as the mundane blades hacked at his onyx protection. Small chips of black rock fell to the ground like shavings around the man's body. Ender took a step back with a grunt. But it was no use, the swords were there to greet him in his retreat. Despite the lack of elegance, Noble persisted in her quest to finish off the traitor before her. Sarai, get ready. Noble signaled her friend. The redhead raised her spear and waited for an opening while still keeping Counsel's thralls back from the fray. There wasn't much time left. 5, 4, 3. Noble hoped silently that the tyrant would be late. She wasn't ready. Then it happened. With a sword heading straight for his eye and no way to step back, Ender raised his arm to swat the blade away like a troublesome fly. Now! Noble screamed, putting all of her effort into the barrage of attacks. Sarai's spear flew from her hand directly at the bulge in Counsel's chest. The tip was lit with incandescent flames, ready to burst through the weak spot and destroy the source of Ender's power. No! Counsel turned his back, willing to risk another cut across his back rather than open his chest to her fury. But the spear disappeared into a rain of sparks before it ever hit Ender's body. It had been a feint. A sharp tip plunged into Ender's chest and he came face to face with a third attacker. The dark-haired man had been waiting for his exact moment. He glared at Counsel mercilessly. There you are. Did you miss me? Nick mimicked the man's sing-song voice back at him. Derek. Ender gasped as recognition dawned in his eyes. You're supposed to be dead. That won't stop me from killing you, Nickel replied. Hope we never meet in the afterlife. Lightning and thunder happened simultaneously. The ground, which was cracked and battered, shook violently and finally gave way. As Noble had predicted, the southern half of the kingdom began to sink. Before their eyes, what had been a glorious expanse of crestfall became the chasm Noble was all too familiar with. Ender's Deep had formed. After making sure Sarai was safe, Noble turned to see Nickel twist the knife before removing it. The dagger dripped with purple venom of its enchantment. The stolen heart of the tyrant broke with a soft tinkling of glass, sending wisps of tenebrous mist into the air like forgotten dreams. Council screamed as he tried to stem the loss of power with his hands. The black shell coating his skin shattered, allowing each and every cut and nick to ooze with blood. Wrought in the abyss, Noble sent all of the swords at the dying man. Rather than bounce off, they dug deep, creating a grotesque pincushion. Ender tumbled backward before falling into the bottomless chasm. Noble felt his emotional signature be snuffed out once and for all from this world. She released a breath that she didn't know she had been holding. A short way off, Nickel dropped to one knee. That was for Kosi. Since Noble didn't get the notification from the spell, Nickel's venom must have gotten credit for the kill. That was just as well. She only hoped the poison was as painful as what he had inflicted on the innocent Simkus. The rest of the kingdom continued to shudder as more of the world was consumed by the forming gorge. The falling rocks whispered as they fell, calling more things to follow in their stony footsteps. The tyrant continued to descend as well. Even with Krai's catastrophic lightning strike, the massive creature had not slowed his speed. Perhaps he could not, or simply didn't want to. Thankfully, it seemed to still be after Ender, or what was left of him. After shearing off the top of the palace with one of its legs, the Lord of the Mountain continued into the deep before crashing into the south wall of the chasm. The impact compromised the integrity of the stone, sending a second avalanche to follow the first. The Lord's 6 legs pushed off of the falling debris as its huge wings blew away the dirt free from the creature's hulking body. One of his large feathers fell from his back, floating down as he took to the air once more. The tyrant was so huge that it would take a moment before it could turn to make another pass at the humans. As it circled over the field of the southern plan in a wide arc, Noble, Sarai, and Nickel stood on the precipice with grim expressions. What do we do now? Nickel shook his head. We've lost the poison and the bait. Noble looked at the sky, then behind her toward what was left of the city kingdom. The battle was raging as the smell of death wafted toward them. Her face was solemn. What do? We do what we came to do. We kill the tyrant. We save the kingdom. And we conquer this nightmare. There is no other option. Even before Sarai and Nickel had found their way into the nightmare, Noble had presented her plan to Amira in great detail. While some of it had changed with the introduction of new tools and assets, the core of the objective had remained the same. Kill the tyrant. And that is what Noble would do. How fast can you get to the city gate? Noble asked Nickel. A myriad of sparks formed in her free hand. Not fast enough to beat that thing, why? Noble thought for a moment. She could lift both of the cohort members over the chasm and get past the wall more quickly than if they ran through the city streets, but since neither of them was familiar with aerial combat, the risk seemed greater than the reward. We better get moving. As the one who knew the city best, Nickel led the group away from the ledge and into what was left of the kingdom. They entered a wide thoroughfare. While some of the buildings lay in ruins from creatures dropping from the sky, many were still intact even with all the heavy fighting. The trio of awakened leapt into the battle without a second thought. Using his perception, Nickel anticipated the moves of both the humans and the nightmare creatures to pick the fastest and most efficient path through the street. When he couldn't find a smooth path, he made one with his daggers. Flanking his sides, Noble and Sarai took down as many of the enemy as they could with their estoc and spear. While Sarai was conserving her essence for the tyrant's approach, she still was a highly skilled fighter with her weapon alone. They tore down the street with precise killing intent. You have slain an awakened monster, fractured geode. You have slain. You. The words overlapped until Noble was forced to block them from her head. What good was the spell telling her what she could see with her own eyes? Blood ran through the streets, both human and monster, though at this moment, the monster blood seemed more prevalent. Noble was determined for it to stay that way. The gate is too far. Do you want to head into the crops? Nickel asked through their shared memory while he continued to lead the charge. The quadrant which held most of the crops had remained mostly unharmed in the series of earthquakes. Because there were no humans mixed in with the harvest, the nightmare creatures had not yet ventured into that part of the city either. But Noble rejected the proposal. Keep going. I want to lure the tyrant away from the city. With what? Nickel asked aloud, startling Sarai while she defended his left side. After fracturing another geode, Noble held out the portcullis key. Sarai caught a glimpse of it as she spun. It looks just like the heart. She remembered the ball which Council had manifested in his hand. Hopefully King Kra'i thinks so too. Noble turned and sent the ball soaring into the air. With all of the fear in the city, it lit up and shimmered with an inner light. You think it will see that small little thing? Nickel's question was barely out of his mouth before the hulking giant groaned. Its impossibly long proboscis unfurled, but instead of releasing another lightning strike, it surged in front of it to try and catch the ball in its grasp. But it was still too far off. Not that Noble would have let him have it. As soon as the tyrant reacted to the bauble, she dropped it from the air and brought it back to her palm. Its eyesight seems pretty decent, Noble responded with a wry grin. Reaching a spot where there was a moment of calm, the three stopped to take a breath. They were almost to the gate, but two mountain regents were blocking the exit. The horned goat crashed against the alabaster walls, unwilling to rest until not a single stone lay on another. How do we get past that? Nickel took a step back. The creature was more powerful than anything they had encountered thus far. I am sure you'll figure something out. I recommend using those large horns against them. They are not as agile as they look. Good luck. With a flick of her wrist, Noble tossed the ball to Nickel. Or rather, she floated it into a fold in his tunic. What am I supposed to do with that? He stowed one dagger to try and fish out the object. Keep running, remember. Noble shrugged. We'll see you soon. With a nod to Sarai, the two ladies turned and ran back the way they came. Are you seriously going to leave me fight a fallen beast alone? Nickel blasted the words in her ear. It's a fallen demon, actually. Noble shook her head as she prepared for the coming trial. You want me to be bait for a tyrant while I solo a fallen demon? Nickel's voice trailed off. Would you rather face the tyrant? Noble raised one eyebrow even though the man could not see. I'll be seeing more of his face than you will, Nickel answered with a sigh. Just make sure I don't become his next meal. You can count on me. The floating awakened glanced at Sarai and took her hand. It would be easier to know where the redhead was if she had physical contact. Are you ready? Noble smiled as she used her sword to stab two geodes with her non-dominant hand. As ready as I will ever be. With the help of her friend's influence, Sarai was calm. The redhead dismissed her spear in favor of a short sword to accompany her on her trip to the sky. The aching ember was her most familiar weapon, but it would be unwieldy as soon as her feet left the ground. The two women continued to hold hands as they fought side by side. It wasn't long before their backward trek and the tyrant's path finally crossed. Now, Noble quietly let her battle partner know that they were taking off. Sarai braced herself. Unlike when Noble was holding her around the middle, she felt no support while floating on the breeze. The free flight was both liberating and terrifying. Watch out. Noble released the woman's hand and dashed behind her to take one of the flying bats out of the sky. The higher they rose, the more sentinels fluttered around their master, ready to do his bidding. And that meant trying to take the human women out of the sky. But Noble wouldn't let the mass of flying bats stop her. She had trained for this kind of combat, and these mindless creatures had mostly only ever ferried the cargo of their master down from the mountains. Except for having no definite place to aim, they were easier to take down than the wasps and bees of the gate that had led her here. Thankfully, none of those creatures manifested just because Noble had remembered their existence. That would have been truly unfortunate. Here comes another one. Noble paused just long enough to cover her ears. Sarai followed suit just in time for the tyrant's large proboscis to shoot its signature bolt toward the ground. Nickel. Noble unconsciously checked to make sure her friend was safe. There was a long moment of deafening silence before the answer came. That was too close. It got one of the goat things instead. What kind of joke are you trying to pull up there? Taking a deep breath, Noble gave Sarai a reassuring smile that Nickel was fine. Noble clicked her tongue. No joke. We are deadly serious. Hold on. The tyrant is coming down for a visit real soon. Noble had studied the movements of the tyrant in depth. Both old writings and in-person interviews had shed light on the habits of the lord and his deranged court. Most people had only seen the tyrant once or twice at least and lived to tell about it. But each small piece of information painted a greater picture. That research was how the queen knew about the intervals between the lightning. One of the kings of old had noted it and documented it in great detail. While the lord could strike more often if he chose, he seemed to need to release the built-up energy periodically when he traveled. Her studies and her own observations had also given her insights into the tyrant's movements. Just like King Kra'i was as a human, the massive lord preferred to let his minions do the fighting for him. The tyrant could easily drop to the ground and annihilate everything in sight with the force of his 6 legs alone, but he seemed unwilling to land. His only brush with the ground thus far was trying to capture counsel. By leading him away from the city, Noble hoped to keep it that way. As she fought her way close to the body of the tyrant, a smile formed on her face. Let him cling to the safety of the air. Not that it was safe, at least not anymore. Beside Noble, Sarai was holding her own. She refrained from using her fire aspect to conserve her essence and was still managing to hold back the creatures as she rose through the air. The tyrant was moving toward them at incredible speed. Even though it was massive, the landing spot which Noble had in mind was rather limited. Its long, thin body was connected to the head by a flattened neck. To reach this spot, Noble would need to avoid the tremendous mouth of the abomination as well as the proboscis that sat above it. The second problem was solved by Nickel. Having seen the portcullis key, the tyrant was using the full extent of its lightning rod to reach the fleeing phantom. There is enough fear that you should be able to go through inanimate objects. Noble sent the message to Nickel, hoping he could still hear her. Figured that out right after you left. Nickel's eye roll was apparent. If she had been looking below, she would have seen him phasing through one building after another on his mad dash toward the city's exit. It had caused a bit of destruction because of the nightmare creatures barreling after him, but no one could bother with that detail just now. Nickel didn't speak again. Noble left him alone to avoid the tyrant's reaching grasp. While she and Sarai needed to avoid his teeth. Noble had accounted for many things, but she had no way of knowing of the intense currents she would experience when she got near to the colossal body. No one had ever gotten this close before. As the Lord breathed in, Noble felt like the entire world was going to be pulled into his gaping maw. Up close, it seemed big enough to swallow half the kingdom whole. Or all of it in its current condition. Noble. Letting go of her friend's hand, Sarai had no way to resist the current. She was fully at the mercy of the forces acting on her. Unwilling to trust her telekinesis, Noble dove and grabbed her friend around the waist. They dipped below the bottom jaw so closely that Noble's hair was nearly sheared off by one of the impossibly long jagged teeth. Not today. Noble breathed a sigh of relief, but not for long. She would only have one shot to get this right before Nickel would have to face another of the tyrant lightning bolts, or worse. She followed the line of the neck, waiting for the moment to break free from the protection to surface. That was, until she felt something coming at her from below with blinding speed. Even though Noble had hoped to escape the tyrant's notice, that was an impossible task. A woman sporting black and yellow armor and another one with fiery red hair did not exactly resemble any of his minions. The front right of the Lord's 6 legs curled on itself to capture the delicious prey as a pre-dinner appetizer. If not for Noble's extra sense, he would have gotten his way. Noble shifted to the far side of the neck to avoid the swipe. Instead, she encountered a different obstacle. The wind. As massive as the creature was, it needed 4 large wings to keep itself in the air. It couldn't float magically like Noble, and so each wing needed to overcome an almost insurmountable amount of gravity with each flap. While it was something she might have been able to contend with alone, there was no way that she could manage 2 people in the gale force winds. They plummeted in freefall. Loop it. Quick. With one hand on her friend and the other holding the estoc, Noble had no way to call another memory into existence. But Sarai did. The redhead must have foreseen the difficulty, for she already had a ball of twine in her hand. Taking one end in her palm, she threw the other at the creature's neck. Oh number. The small ball was not impervious to the current of air any more than the 2 women. The string fell short of its goal. Or so Noble thought. Activating the spider's web enchantment, Sarai caused the thread to stick in front of the joint of the tyrant's primary left leg and instantly harden. With the anchor in place, Noble sped them up the makeshift pole ladder with all her might. Feeling the sticky substance, the tyrant adjusted the movement of its leg to remove the offending object from its skin. The web shattered and dissipated into a rain of sparks. But it had done its job. They made it to the Lord's back. Grab hold. Noble dug her fingers around the edge of an uneven scale as she held on for dear life. Noble sheathed her sword. If by chance one of the tyrant's minions could reach her, she would have no angle to fight them off anyway. It was better to have both hands for the climb. Although the animal was nearly the size of a small island, it thankfully did not count as ground. Scraping against the scales of the tyrant's mountainous side, both ladies quickly pulled themselves onto the Krai's back. Once they got behind the head and between the massive wings, the wind was inexplicably calm. If not for the ground moving swiftly below them, Noble might have forgotten that they were flying. She looked at the Lord's neck. Unlike the underside, the top of it as well as its inhuman shoulders were covered in a blanket of black feathers. Some were small like the one that had been trimmed to fit in Amira's hair, but others were longer and wider than the 2 ladies combined. Noble's theory had proven correct so far. We made it. A smile crept onto the Queen's face. Unfortunately, that was the easy part. The biggest problem with the plan was knowing what to do next. The sun obviously bothered the tyrant, but no one had any idea why. Noble would have to discover the reason behind the aversion to light soon, or else. They had already spent too much time. Slowing down slightly, the tyrant loomed over Nickel with his minions close behind. Lightning struck the ground. Nickel. She received a maniacal laugh in return for her cry. Ha ha ha, I can't believe that worked. Looks like you aren't the only one who can make a lightning rod, Noble. Wrap that chain around those fallen fools' horns and let nature take its course. Smells like a cookout. Just make sure you aren't the next course. Noble was too relieved to be amused by Nick's enthusiasm. She went back to the problem at hand. How would she figure out what the weak point was and exploit it? The bulky creature shifted to one side. Nickel must have changed directions after his barbecue below, and the tyrant was chasing him once more. Since she could float, Noble had no trouble remaining on the uneven surface, but Sarai reached down to take hold of one of the scales. The sudden tilt also affected the creatures blocking out the sun. One massive wing knocked a swath of them out of the air, causing a beam of sunshine to break through the gloom. It touched the tyrant's scaly skin. And nothing happened. The Lord didn't even seem to notice that it had happened. Had he suddenly grown immune to the sun? If that were true, then why was the Lord of the Mountain still hiding under a canopy of his followers? Something shiny in the blanket of feathers caught Noble's attention. She stepped forward to examine it more closely. What is, unused to actually walking, her foot slipped on a large feather almost as soon as she stepped between the tyrant's shoulders. She fell unceremoniously on her rump. Just like a toddler. It would have been comical if it weren't so frustrating. Sarai gasped. I'm fine. Noble assured her over the growing buzz of yet another electric charge. Sarai shook her head and pointed. You're covered in blood. Noble rose to her feet and then floated over the spot where she had just been. The lower part of her armor was dripping with shiny red liquid. But the blood wasn't hers. Dropping quickly, she stamped on the feathers with both feet. More fluid spilled out. The tyrant roared in pain. Noble's eyes widened. Help me move these feathers. The two ladies plucked and pushed aside the large black plumes to reveal a hole in the tyrant's chest. Council had had 2 hearts before he died, causing his chest to bulge. This abomination no longer had a heart at all. Only a gaping wound where a heart should have been. The blinding heat of the sun would aggravate the injury. That was the method that Amira had used to chase off the already weakened abomination. With the heart utterly destroyed, surely the bleeding tyrant would soon follow. Yet here he was raining down terror on the kingdom of Crestfall. If he refuses to die, then we should give him a little nudge. Noble looked at Sarai, who nodded. While Noble held back the feathers that they could not remove, Sarai blasted the inside of the tyrant with balls of her flames. The Lord convulsed, tilting to try and get the offenders off of his back. He did a barrel roll, forcing Sarai to stop her onslaught and hold tight to the abomination's back. When the tyrant righted, Sarai tried again. It's no use, she said after a moment. I'm not strong enough. The tyrant turned its head and saddled them with one of its swiveling eyes. They had been spotted. Soon enough, the curling proboscis would be there to wipe them from their perch once and for all. Do that tunnel of flame that you did before. The one where you hit the wall. I know you can do it. Cook him from the inside out. Noble saw Sarai's horrified expression. I can't. I was only able to do that with the bracelets. Noble looked down at her wrists and stripped them of their jewelry. Take mine. This will give you what you need. They don't work anymore. Sarai shook her head sadly. Prove it, Noble challenged. The redhead hesitated. What other choice did they have? She took the bracelets and slipped them on her arms. Then, with one last push, she swirled fire around herself and tried to compress it. Sweat poured down her brow, not from the heat, but from the concentration. Noble concentrated too. Tell me when. A tense silence passed between them before Sarai let loose her compressed firestorm. Simultaneously, Noble spoke the verse for light, and getting brighter. The fire intensified, giving an ethereal quality to the blaze. The column of flame, which was already blinding, lit up the sky like the tail of a comet before streaking into the tyrant's chest cavity. An explosion of light and immolating fire erupted through the hole, sending a wave of blood to wash down the tyrant's back. Noble wanted to see the results, but the ladies had already worn out their welcome. Watch out! Noble grabbed hold of Sarai as the proboscis raced to trap them in its grasp. The creature was too fast. They wouldn't make it to the edge in time. Eyes swirling, Noble dug deep into her reserves of essence. She pushed the trunk with all of her might. There was no way she could actually stop the tube of lightning from its swift movement. But that was not her goal. She just needed to slow it down a split second. Time to go. The plume of Noble's helmet was brushed by the proboscis, knocking the head covering from her head. But the queen didn't care. No longer over the main torso of the corrupted lord, Noble's body was suddenly still. She and Sarai were left behind by the incredible speed of Tyrant, before being blown down and back by the wind from its wings. Finally stopping her and Sarai's freefall about halfway between the sentinels and the ground, Noble held her breath as she watched. Had the fiery beam and resulting explosion been enough? The black feathers were now smoldering, but that was the only residual evidence that any damage had been done. At first Noble thought she had imagined it, but a few moments later, the fact was undeniable. The Lord of the Mountain was losing altitude. His wing beats were slowing, no longer able to support the massive weight of the rest of his body. The legs spasmed in awkward directions, further complicating the tyrant's strange fall. Then, the massive being went completely still. You have slain a corrupted tyrant, the Raven Lord, King Crai. Noble's heart skipped a beat. Corrupted. From the look on Sarai's face, she had heard the voice of the spell as well. Had they both gotten credit for the kill? Rather than get cocky, the duelist got serious. The Raven Lord, as the spell had called him, was already weakened considerably by the lack of a heart. His rank was surely closer to fallen with the handicap involved. Wait, why was she splitting hairs like this? What did she care what the rank was? As long as he was dead. Nick, we did it. We defeated the Lord of the Mountain. Noble lifted higher into the air to watch the final fall of the tyrannical lord. Her heart skipped a beat for a second time. She had done it all right. The tyrant's final resting place was directly over Nickel's head. Noble barely had time to scream before the cataclysmic crash covered the battlefield in dust and ash. Nickel. Noble's message was matched by her external scream. Sarai saw it too. Silent tears streamed down her face. Drop me and go. Noble mechanically obeyed the command, lowering the redhead and then racing across the once verdant field. The ground was now ripped apart from the impact. Across the landscape, the blood of countless abominations soaked the ground. Nickel had been busy. One spot was charred black and still smoking with monster meat. The only recognizable part of the goat-like creatures was their entangled massive horns. But Noble had no time to admire the man's handiwork. She was far too focused on the destruction in the distance. With no one left to protect, the sentinels broke formation. Sun sifted through, shining light on the broken ground. Nickel. No answer came. Surely he could hear her in this range, so why wasn't he answering? Looking for any sign of her friend, Noble's heart sank. Out on the field, the creatures who had managed not to be crushed by the fall were already gorging themselves on their master's carcass. While the scaly skin covering most of the tyrant's body was too tough for the lower-class beasts, the combined strike by Sarai and Noble had ripped open the chest for the minions to feast. Seeing them, Noble felt sick to her stomach. She retched, wiped her mouth, and then raised her sword. Nickel's clever lightning strike had dealt with the most powerful monsters. Noble made quick work of the scavengers left behind. By the time Sarai caught up to the crash, Noble was wiping her blade. The redhead searched the landscape and then her friend's face. Laundry. I can't sense him. The queen felt tears sting her eyes. You saw, he was right under the tyrant. No, it cannot be. Laundry. Sarai became frantic. She pushed against the tyrant as if she could roll away his body. Not even a dozen awakened would have come close to completing that feat. Yet Sarai did not stop. Noble could feel Sarai's anguish, but she had no comfort to give. Her own spirit was in tatters. Nickel had come into the nightmare to help her. And she had let him down. To Noble, that was a fate worse than if she had died herself. Noble wanted nothing more than to wake up. Maybe this had been a dream while she slept in the nightmare. That was unheard of but not impossible, right? She had been wishing so hard for company that she had conjured Sarai and Nickel up in her mind. Maybe they were still back in the real world. Deep down, Noble knew she was only fooling herself. The reality of the events around her would haunt her for the rest of her days. She gripped her head, whispers of doubt and condemnation coming without welcome. Why won't this blasted nightmare end? Why are you so quick to go? Are you trying to leave me behind? A voice unlike any of the others broke into her consciousness. Noble froze in the middle of her self-loathing and focused. Nickel. She didn't dare believe it. She had seen him be crushed. Do you have another guy talking in your head? You really should get that checked out, Noble. Stretching out her special sense across the plane, Noble again tried to feel Nickel's emotional signature. It was nowhere to be found. Where are you? Are you hurt? Noble glanced at the carcass. Worse. I'm dead. What? Noble's eyes went wide. Laundry laughed. Dead gods, you are too easy. I'm fine. Giving up her attempt to move the tyrant, Sarai turned around, defeated. She opened her mouth to speak when she saw the strange expression on Noble's face. What is it? It's Nick. He's alive. For now at least. I might kill him when I find him. Noble continued to scan the ground for any sign of the unusual wraith. I give up. Tell me where you are so we can get you. There was a pause. I'm not sure where I am, to be honest, it's too dark to tell. That was unhelpful. But you aren't hurt. How did you escape getting squashed? Noble rubbed her forehead, trying to wrap her head around the turn of events. Well, you remember how I couldn't use the key to go through the wall and see the cave drawing because I had no fear. It turns out I have a whole lot of fear when the body of a deranged tyrant is about to come crashing down on my head. Nickel paused and waited for the words to sink in. You used the portcullis key to escape. Noble gasped. It suddenly made sense. Extending her colorless sight in a different way, Noble confirmed her thought. Nickel's mention of darkness could only mean one thing. You were underground. Yeah, I might have overdone it. I've been working my way up through the caverns ever since the fall. Sarai waited patiently, trying not to disturb the silent conversation. Noble decided not to leave both of her friends in the dark about the situation. He's below us somewhere. Nick used the key to go through the earth. Noble shut her eyes, trying to get a better read on where the third member of the cohort was. Through the ground. That's brilliant. The redhead clapped her hands. Noble had to agree. While it wasn't something she would ever try, she was pretty certain the pain of the ground would be intensified as her body passed through it. The quick thinking and ingenuity had pulled Nickel from the jaws of death. Literally. Literally what? Nick was confused. Nothing. Hold still. I think I am getting close. Noble motioned for Sarai to come close. Stomp right here. Can you hear that? I can, it's knocking debris on me. Back up. Noble summoned a memory called Past Regrets. The tool memory had a wide bottom edge that was good for digging. It was one of the few ways Noble could garden effectively without causing herself pain. We haven't much time. As soon as the sentinels get organized again, they will come to this area first. So will those many of the creatures still alive in the city. Free meat is irresistible. Sarai pursed her lips. Tell Laundry to stay back. I've got this. When I said back up, I meant way back. Sarai blasted the ground with a small column of fire. The molten earth exploded. When it settled, there was an opening in the ground very similar to the opening in the tyrant. Only instead of death, this one brought forth a single life. Fire, are you trying to kill me? Nickel asked as Noble floated him out of the hole. No, that's Noble. Sarai laughed. She and Noble caught Nickel in a hug, and for a moment all three of them hovered above the broken ground. Okay, that's enough touching. The man squirmed. I thought we lost you. Sarai cried. With a sigh, Noble released him to stand on his own 2 feet. Sarai even tried to push the tyrant to get you out. Fireshing's cheeks turned red. It was the least I could do. We are glad you are not dead, Noble smiled. Nick's eyes opened slightly. Don't jinx me, Noble. We would never. We are just happy that you are still with us. Sarai refrained from a second hug. Nickel nodded slowly. Thanks guys, he said softly as he brushed the dirt from his black cloak. The wraith looked toward Crestfall, his expression becoming serious. Now, come on. We have a nightmare to finish. I don't know about you, but I could use a real shower. Before they could make the trek back toward Crestfall, the sentinels finally decided it was time to attack. They descended, splitting into groups before they reached the ground. While some were pulled by the souls of the living beings in the kingdom, others could not resist the tantalizing meal of the former tyrant. Sarai shielded her eyes as she looked up. That's unfortunate. What do you want to do? Noble sighed. What do you think? Should we clean up the trash here first? Nickel clicked his tongue. Might as well. They will go to the city when they are done anyway. Killing them now is more efficient. He called forth his favorite long-range memory. Sheathing her estoc, the floating awakened summoned a bow and enchanted arrows. Sarai raised both her spear and her eyebrows. I didn't know you were an archer, Noble. Noble hooked a grin. I'm not. But it's kind of hard not to hit something in that mess, don't you think? Rain was the archer in their family. She had even had some lessons from the most famous marksman in the world. The charming master had encouraged her remarkable talent. On the other hand, Noble had not put in the practice to be anything more than passable, especially since her bow was only a Tier 1 memory. Her enchanted arrows were only slightly better. The quiver never ran out and the wind whistle property enhanced the air around the tip to make it cut sharper and fly true. The second function was less necessary now. Noble was going for quantity over quality. Adjusting her aim, Noble let 3 arrows fly in quick succession. They tore through the flimsy flyers, killing the first and digging deep into the second. You have slain a dormant beast, soaring sentinel. You have slain a dormant beast, soaring sentinel. The spell felt like an echo in her ears and it only continued as the other arrows landed. Beside her, Nickel shot his strange projectiles into the horde. The rounds bore holes into the winged beasts, eliciting a shriek from each creature as it fell. Most were too focused on the tyrant's meat to pay any attention to the 3 puny humans, but the few that attacked were quickly brought down under the might of Sarai's spear. Slowly but surely, the horde began to dwindle. "It's like shooting fish in a barrel," Nickel commented after hitting 3 with one shot. "Have you tried that?" Noble looked at him as she drew another shot. She got a strange look in response. No, not recently at least." They fell silent as the mindless beasts continued to flock around the dead tyrant. Noble continued to shoot until the motion was automatic. She almost wished the quiver would not have an endless supply. But every time she reached back, another feathered fletching was there for her to grab. Her fingers were blistered, but she wasn't about to stop. Not until every last one was brought down from the sky. They were around 200 meters from the tyrant, and yet the blood filled the space in the crater formed by the dead lord and was now flowing toward them like a grotesque stream. It would have reached them if not for the protection of the hole that Sarai had made to save Nickel. The seeping red liquid tumbled into the cavern in a crimson waterfall. By the time they were done, the area around the tyrant looked like a lake of red wine. Noble shot a final arrow and dropped her arms. They were on fire from exertion. She had no idea how long she had been bringing creatures out of the sky, but by the pile of flesh in the middle of the lake, Noble realized it had been hours. No wonder she was exhausted. Short bursts of energy were one thing, but grueling marathons, no matter how tedious, were much harder on her system. Her muscles, especially in her arms, screamed for rest. "Let's hope the awakened in Crestfall had a better time." She spoke her thought aloud. If the other 2 thought her comment strange, they didn't say it. They all instinctively looked toward what was left of the kingdom. The air over the broken city was clear of movement. Hopefully, that was a good sign. There's only one way to find out. Nickel dismissed his long-range weapon in favor of his sword. He looked even more worn out than she felt. That's when Noble realized what the mysterious projectiles that had been used like bullets actually were. They were soul essence. "You gave it your all, didn't you?" Noble sent him a concerned look. He shrugged. "I'll be fine." They searched for the soul shards in the tyrant, but none were found. Noble had suspected this would be the case when she saw just how empty the tyrant's chest had been. They must have been tied to Kry's heart, which would have been what Council absorbed to become a master. Yet another thing Ender had stolen from the group. The earth shook slightly, groaning. The tyrant and his mound of flesh began to sink. Sarai pursed her lips. "We need to move. I am shocked the weight of that hasn't caused another massive collapse." The other 2 silently agreed. Abandoning the carnage, they moved swiftly back to the kingdom's gate, though not as quickly as they could. They needed to conserve the energy that they had left. When they finally made it to the entry, General Theo was waiting for them. His armor was covered in blood, but he was alive. He bowed. "A sentry saw you coming. Welcome back to Crestfall, Your Majesty, Your Grace, and esteemed Nickel." Theo's reverence was clear in his voice. He turned and addressed those around. "All hail the heroes of Crestfall." Cheers broke out among the crowd. Noble held up her hand to wave off the praise. Blood dripped down it from her blistered fingers. Theo called a soldier. "Go find healer Bramwell immediately. He should be by the north wall." But Noble stopped him. "I'm fine, really. Don't work Bramwell on my account." She remembered the healer who lost part of his youth while helping others. Hopefully he is only helping the most dire cases. There are many of those. Theo dipped his head. The fighting. Noble noted how quiet the street seemed. There may be a creature or 2 that is still around, but our troops fought valiantly. The general was exhausted, but pleased with the victory. The civilians. The queen looked toward the north wall. It was still standing. Hadn't Theo said that the healer was located there? "We are still sifting through the rubble, but the casualties are much lower than if we had not evacuated the southern part of the city. Many people owe you their lives." Noble could not accept Theo's words. Her negligence by not seeing Ender for who he was had brought this calamity on the city. It didn't matter his aspect had hidden his true nature. Noble hated that she had ignored her paranoia in her quest to finish the nightmare. "I am glad everything seems to have settled." Noble forced a smile. The words brought her to the thought that was nagging her at the back of her mind. They had vanquished the tyrant and killed off his minions. The city was at peace from what she could tell. The people were broken, but many were still alive and able to rebuild the ravaged city. The war was over. So, why hadn't the nightmare ended? Noble got a sinking feeling. Theo's wincing face confirmed her worst fear. Something was very wrong. What is it? Noble asked. Beside her, Nickel and Sarai wore the same looks of concern. Theo hesitated. It's nothing. I really hate to bother you, but something is amiss by the gap. I've gotten strange reports but have not been able to investigate yet. The queen wanted to ask more, but if Theo had not been to look, she wasn't sure if the inquiry would bear any fruit. After nodding to her companions and getting affirmation, Noble motioned to her general. Show me. The walk through the town was both humbling and a little encouraging. Many of the structures were broken, but some still stood tall like nothing had happened. The crops in the distance still seemed to be in decent shape, mostly because no one had been fighting in that area. Already, some people were out in the field gathering the fall harvest like they were before the attack. It was weird to see such a mundane task in the middle of all the carnage. Closer to the palace, the damage was worse. Where Ender had landed, the entire street was obliterated. Selfish fool. What? Nickel shot her a strange look. Noble ran her hand through her hair. After losing her helmet and dismissing it, she never had brought it back for her head. Not you. Counsel. The man in black shrugged. I suppose this would be a bad time to say I told you so. Noble's jaw dropped open. You told me he was a jerk, not that he was a mind-influencing psychopath. The corner of Nickel's mouth twitched. I didn't know I needed to be so specific. I assumed you would read between the lines. As Nickel was the one who had spent the least time around council, his thoughts had been influenced the least. Noble would need some time to untangle what she actually felt and what was due to the aspect of the manipulative protector. Next time spell it out for me. Though I hope there isn't a next time. Noble covered her nose and held breath to keep out the stench as they passed the worst of the carnage. The smell of death was everywhere, and the poisonous beetles smelled extra putrid after dying. The few people who were beginning to clean the streets had their noses plugged with cloth ripped from their garments. War was ugly. Noble hated it with a passion. The only mercy was that Ender had controlled the mindless abominations and not people to fight against Noble and the others. Killing innocent people who were under the man's influence would have triggered another kind of trauma. It was better not to think about that. Noble calmed her thoughts and circulated her essence. Her body was physically tired, but the time spent taking down the Sentinel horde had given her time to get back some of her soul reserves. Feeling a little rejuvenated, Noble tried to focus on the coming task. For some reason, the nightmare had not ended. Noble was sure that protecting the kingdom from the tyrant was the conflict that needed resolving, so what had changed? A lot. Nickel had struck down Ender and Noble had thrown him into the abyss. A whisper of doubt entered her head. Was she sure the man was dead? Yes, she was positive. Noble had felt Ender's emotions snuffed out. Stop making me doubt myself, Nick. Noble rolled her eyes. I'm lost, Nickel responded genuinely. Noble frowned. Maybe she really had been just arguing with herself. Strange. As they neared the palace, the queen braced herself to see what became of her dead friend. The Simcus was no longer there. His entire body had been eaten away by the poison, leaving a pool of black liquid behind in the makeshift glass bowl. If she was here long enough, she would have to find a way to dispose of the liquid, which was still bubbling, ready to consume anything it came in contact with. The proof of that was all around the powdered glass. Any creature that had attempted to taste the demon before it dissolved had also ended up dying from the poison. Some of them had landed in the pool and been eaten away as well. Others had merely a taste and still died but were left intact. Such a gruesome way to die. Noble was glad Ender was gone so the treacherous liquid could never be made again. All of Council's things would be burned including the sorcery book if she had anything to say about it. Theo looked at the bubbling liquid with trepidation. Noble forced a smile. If this is what you were worried about, then I can assure you that you are quite safe as long as you don't touch it." The general coughed lightly and rubbed the back of his head. He seemed to have been lost in some dreadful thought. He blinked a couple of times before answering. "You hear that?" He told some of the soldiers nearby who were picking up the rubble. "Don't touch the bubbly stuff. It isn't safe." The men looked at him confused for a moment. Did he think they were stupid? All but one young soldier saluted and went back to collecting the debris. The final man stared out blankly, still dazed by all that had happened. His eyes looked devoid of hope, and Noble could feel the sadness in his soul. Noble could understand his grief. She wondered just how much he had lost today. He might not even know how much just yet. The general sighed heavily. Unwilling to chastise the traumatized private, Theo pulled his gaze away from the workers and the pile of poisoned corpses. He motioned toward the edge. "While I appreciate your advice, Your Majesty, that wasn't the problem that I brought you here for." "Then what?" Noble hesitated. She looked down into the abyss with a strained expression. Instead of looking ominous like it did at home, it looked inviting. Darkness was often considered a form of solace and rest. Didn't she need rest? The nightmare and past day had been so very taxing for her soul, hadn't it? Kosi was gone too due to her being too trusting of someone she should have been cautious of. Ender was dead, thankfully. The tyrant was too. But the nightmare was still not over. It was not enough. It was never enough. She felt very useless. That is why the darkness was the best place for her. Wasn't it far more welcoming than the unforgiving nightmare? Crestfall was broken beyond repair. That didn't matter. It was never the way to freedom. The only freedom was below. Noble didn't just feel useless, no, she was useless. Wasn't that why she had failed the nightmare and was stuck here for eternity? Eternity, without her family. Didn't she miss her family? Maybe Fort and her children were hiding in the embrace of the darkness. No. Noble paled. She looked at Sarai, who had a strange expression on her face. Even Nickel looked rattled. "You hear them too, don't you?" The queen looked at her friends. The whispers. The intrusive thoughts at first seemed like her own self-doubt. Spell knew how much she had been questioning her choices today alone. It was the last thought that made Noble realize her consciousness had been invaded. Her family would never be hidden in the darkness. They were her guiding light home. Sarai and Nickel nodded. They had been their own versions of the same torment. Fortunately, they all had the fortitude not to agree with the hateful whispers. As long as the three of them were still alive, there was hope. Theo's face darkened. Whispers. That wasn't exactly the complaint I got either. Though it might explain the strange reports I have been getting. Come on, General. Just tell us. Nickel was suddenly nervous, which was very unlike him. Theo nodded. Of course. But before he could explain the contents of the reports, the dazed worker who had been cleaning up behind them pushed the queen aside and dove over the edge. That. Theo wanted to say more, but the sheer shock of seeing someone willingly plummet to their death was beyond his comprehension. That was the strange report he had received, that someone had leapt into the breach. The general had assumed the person had actually fallen in, but then a second message from a different part of the ledge brought the same story. Theo wasn't sure if it was the same story or two different instances, and he wanted to question the people directly. Unfortunately, he hadn't immediately found the sergeant who had sent the original report, and then the strange whispers confronting his ability to command and lead had thrown him off balance. The stalwart general was just coming back from that significant moment of self-doubt when young Red had decided to try to fly. Theo was slow to react, but he reached out to grab the boy to pull him to safety. His fingers brushed against Red's dented armor but could not gain purchase. The sudden act of heroism threw him off balance for the second time in so many minutes, only this time it was physically. Just as he was about to plummet, he felt himself being pushed back safely on the ledge by invisible hands. That would have been astonishing enough, but then something even more astonishing happened. After a short cry of frustration, the queen pressed her lips together and dove after the falling man. Theo tried to dive after her, but Nickel caught his arm. What in the name of the beast god was happening? Dash! Noble felt the soldier push her as he passed. He was filled with overwhelming despair. The queen assumed he was coming to report something or air his grievances to her until she looked at his face. Sorrow filled the creases of his forehead, but his eyes were filled with grim determination. No. The next things happened in a flash. As the soldier plummeted into the deep, Noble heard Theo exclaim that this was the problem. Why hadn't he said so sooner? It didn't matter. What was done. Noble immediately reached out with her ability. She steadied Theo before he could tumble over the breach, but the other man. She had him for a moment, but then he suddenly continued to fall. A force other than gravity had taken hold of him, and he was ripped from her grasp. Painfully. It was very different than when Nickel used a memory to overcome her powers. The force countering hers was vindictive. Ow! Noble cried out. But she was undeterred. She instinctively flew into the breach. If she couldn't grab him with her aspect, she would capture him with her arms. What in the spell are you doing? Nickel's voice pounded in her head. Saving someone. Noble rolled her eyes. Even if the man wanted to end it all, the queen wasn't about to let her do it in front of her eyes. There was a short pause. His name is Red. Nickel's voice was more subdued. Red. Noble screamed. Red, can you hear me? The wind whipped past her as she dove, stealing her voice away from the man below her. Pressing into her power, she pulled her body tight and sped her fall to catch up with Red. Almost, there. Noble reached out her hands. Her fingers wrapped around the man's arm. She took hold of his left bicep and slowed her descent. Red twisted his body to face his rescuer. And pumped his right fist into her face. Oh. Noble released the soldier. Even though the man had no armor on his hand, the hit still shocked her. She was tempted to leave him to his doom just to prevent her nose from getting another knock from his knuckles. But that would have been wrong. The man was clearly not in his right mind. Diving again, Noble took a firm hold of the back of his breastplate and pulled up. Let me go. Red screamed. He tried to elbow Noble, but this time she was ready. Shifting her weight, Noble swung him to one side and let his arms flail. Stop squirming. The queen sent a jolt of fear and then calm into the man. Please work. The first was the stronger emotion, meant to break Red from the overwhelming despair permeating his being. The second was, in theory, to stop him from trying to thwart her efforts to save him. You won't save him, or yourself. Why don't you just relax and let the darkness take you? Now that Noble had identified she was being influenced by an outside source, she had no trouble differentiating it from her own thoughts. Either the creature relied on the victim not knowing that the thoughts were foreign, or it was just casting a wide net to see who would listen to its sinister lies. Noble guessed it was the latter. After all that had happened, the abomination didn't need to work too hard to find people in despair. Noble had felt the younger man's hopelessness. A small nudge was likely all that was needed to persuade the soldier to plunge into the breach. It was heartbreaking but understandable. However, understandable did not make his sacrifice acceptable. Noble would not let Red be the monster's lunch. Let me save you, blast it. After the emotional invasion on Red's senses, the young man spasmed and went still. And not a moment too soon. Blast it, it is hot down here. That made some sense. The volcanoes that had formed the ash in the mountains had also created a bed of obsidian below the caverns of Ender's Deep. If Noble had turned on a light at this depth, she was sure that she would find the smooth, black stone. But there was no time to practice her geology skills just now. Whatever had tempted Red to end it all was still down there somewhere. Noble pulled the limp man to his chest and shot upward. I've got him, she told Nickel through the other's voice. Good. Nick was relieved to hear Noble's words. Hurry back so we can figure out what to do. On my way. Noble sped up her flight. Thankfully, the man easy to carry. He remained still in her arms, making her worry that she had fried his brain by breaking him free of the monster's grasp. The creature had some sort of invisible hold on him that Noble had been unable to break with her levitation alone. What if the hold was on his mind as well as his body, and severing it did permanent damage? I'm sorry, Your Majesty, Red's timid voice was barely audible. I was weak. It wasn't your fault. You were tricked. Noble sent another feeling of warmth into him. Now that she knew what was causing the discomfort in her soul, she was able to not only fight it but help others as well. At least it was only one person. Noble knew as soon as she thought it that it was a mistake. A moment later, her worst fear was confirmed. 2 more bodies came plummeting her way. Seriously. Noble felt like crying. Yes, I am quite serious, Red mumbled, unsure of why the monarch was suddenly angry. Not you, Noble gritted her teeth. Hold on. Put up a barrier. Make a perimeter. Stop anyone else from jumping. Noble screamed at Nickel. Every doubt in Noble's mind about the identity of the monster behind the whispers was now extinct. This had to be the same creature that the saint fought in his nightmare. The similarities were just too uncanny. But according to the saint, it took months from the point of his entry until the citizens started to leap into the abyss. That didn't line up with what she was experiencing right now. With Red in her arms and 2 others on their way, the timeline of events had somehow changed. Why were so many people taking the tumble so far ahead of schedule? What had changed? Everything. Noble was pretty sure the barrier had not been broken or disabled before the attack in the original timeline. And the people would have had no way to know that they should evacuate the southern half of the city. And since there was no huge mass of bones outside of Ender's Deep as far as she knew, the tyrant must have died elsewhere. Perhaps even in the crevice. If that were true, then half the people of Crestfall and the Lord of the Mountain would have been food for the newly released creature in the deep. Noble had robbed the abomination of his feast and thus accelerated its need for food. Who knows how long it had been since the last time the monster had been fed. There would be time to contemplate that later. Right now, Noble had bigger problems. She looked up where 2 spots blocked out the minimal light above her. For the moment, Noble was glad she had not called forth a light while falling into the deep. Not only would it have made it easier for whatever was below to find her, but it would have rendered her blind to the shadows now coming her way. From their emotional signatures, the closer of the falling humans was male while the other was female. Both reeked of the same despair as Red before his jump. Red looked up too, a moment of recognition dawning on his face. Your Majesty. I said, hold on. Noble shifted him to her back, having him wrap his arms around her neck. She wore him like a mundane cape. There would be plenty of time for him to be ashamed later, but for now, he gripped the flying woman with all his might. As Noble rose to meet the other victims, she called a memory into being. Part of the staff of sages was still forming when she intercepted the second man. This time, she instinctively knew to avoid his fist. As soon as she caught hold of his hand, the staff's chains became cuffs. Applying one to her left wrist and the other to the man's, Noble dangled him like a piece of human jewelry from her arm. Let me go, he screamed, sounding just like Red had a moment ago. Tempting, Noble responded as she dove toward the third thrall. While she had been securing the second man, the lady had unfortunately gotten past her guard and continued to fall. Noble picked up speed to try and intercept the final human before she met her unfortunate end. With so much extra weight, the falling suddenly felt much more natural. Clad in a simple frock that was in tatters, the lady looked even more pitiful than the other 2. But also more determined. She seemed to know that Noble was coming for her. So the woman did her best to avoid Noble's reach. She placed her arms above her head and tilted downward, like a diver about to break the surface of a pool. Get back here, Noble cried out in frustration. Suddenly the woman's head snapped toward Noble, sending a chill down the queen's spine. The woman spread her body and came at the other 3 with a crazy look in her eyes. Oh. Noble caught the lady's wrist before she could claw out the queen's eyes. The raggedy woman hissed and opened her mouth, ready to bite off her savior's nose. Noble instinctively pushed her away. Stop it. Sending out the same combination of fear and comfort, Noble jolted both the woman and the man hanging from her wrist. Their expressions cleared, and the determination in the lady turned to unfiltered fear. The young civilian panicked. That was why Noble had wanted to wait until she had hold of the lady before releasing her from her daze, but it was not meant to be. Come closer, Noble said gently as she tried to guide the woman towards her. Thankfully, when the mental bond was broken, the invisible tether was as well. The woman grabbed Noble's free hand and pulled herself into the queen's embrace. Her sudden movement brought her face to face with Red, startling them both. Noble could feel the woman's sudden interest. "This is not the time or place, we need to get." Just then, 3 more bodies flew past them. Noble's face fell. What could she do? She wanted to help the people, but her arms were full. She dove anyway, desperately hoping for an opportunity to present itself. Noble gasped for breath. Her lungs burned. Down this low, the air was unbearably hot and thick with noxious gas. While Noble could withstand the pressure and pain, she could feel the mundane humans around her struggling. Noble was forced to slow down before Red passed out. He was still holding onto her shoulders, but his grasp was loosening. If the queen pushed any harder, it was likely she would lose him as well. There was no winning. Noble's heart broke with the decision she was forced to make. Rather than lose sight of the other's final moments, Noble summoned the loosened taper and watched it fall into the abyss before hovering it below her. Noble almost wished she hadn't. They were closer to the base of the chasm than Noble had realized, about half of a kilometer away. Further on, the debris from the collapsed kingdom littered the ground. But right below them, something far more harrowing lurked in the darkness. Spanning the bottom of the gorge were thousands of tentacled vines surrounding a grotesque flower filled with seed-like teeth. The corrupted blossom was poised to gobble the humans up. There was nothing anyone could do about it. The pull of the abomination was just too strong. The willing victims plunged into the spirals of teeth without a word. Noble couldn't help but watch the horror. How she wished she could have saved them. The flower shivered for a moment and the earth around them rumbled. Then, the black vines around the flower stretched and grew. They shot up straight for the queen and her cargo. They were no longer out of the creature's reach. Dismissing the candle, Noble pulled her crew through the darkness. She only hoped it was fast enough. The sweeping vines shot through the air at impossible speeds. Noble swerved as the first tendril passed beside her before swiping to the side. Using her secondary sight, Noble could see thousands of needles lining the vile plant's appendages. She could also tell she wasn't going to make it completely out of the way. The vine raked along Red's back. He cried out, "Are you all right?" Noble tried not to panic. "It ripped off the back of my breastplate." Red hugged Noble's neck tighter. "Better the metal than your skin." The queen hoped that would be the only injury Red would suffer. She spun out of the way of another black creeper. Noble was used to being an agile duelist in the Dreamscape. But in all her years of battle, having 3 other people awkwardly hanging from her body while she fought was not a skill she had mastered. And physically lifting things while she floated was different than if she was using just her telekinesis. It was like using a different set of muscles in a workout. Noble knew what to do, but the actual execution needed work. The mundane people around her swung from side to side as she avoided the increasing number of thorny obstacles in her path. Noble wanted to tell the people to stop screaming as it would let the creature know exactly where they were, but she knew it would do no good. The only option was to get higher than the monster could reach. And that was turning out to be far easier said than done. It turned out Noble had dove far deeper than she realized. Then again, between the 3 people she had managed to save, she had fallen straight down for more than a minute. The light marking the surface seemed a world away, but the floating woman was determined to reach that point no matter the cost. 2 vines came at her from opposing directions, ready to clamp her in a pincer grip. But Noble was not in a pinching mood. She slowed down enough for the 2 stalks to collide and used the force of the percussive wave to float backward from the needles. Shifting her momentum, she soared upward again. Almost there. Noble could feel the number of vines around her lessening. Only the longest and strongest were still trying to follow her movement. But just when she thought that she would make it, the man attached to her by the staff of sages screamed in pain. She felt a sudden pull and an even more sudden release. The man screamed louder. Not good. With a burst of energy, Noble pulled ahead of the final vine. It crashed into the wall beside her and sent rubble falling from above. The dirt and stones stung Noble's skin but were far less painful than if it had still been attached to the ground. Squinting, Noble navigated through the cloud of dust. Finally, the air became clear and significantly cooler. Noble, Noble, blast it, you better still be alive. A voice screamed in the queen's head. She couldn't help but smile. I'm here, Nickel. And I brought a few friends. There was sadness in her voice. A 50% success rate wasn't great, but she had truly given it all she had. Noble sighed. We will be up soon. Try very hard not to let anyone else tumble down on us while we try to surface. It took many more minutes for the 4 people to break free from the chasm. When they did, Noble set Red and the other 2 safely away from the ledge. She lowered them beyond a man-made barricade and took stock of the victims. The second gentleman had lost his sandal and part of his foot with it in the final attack by the viney flower. He was bleeding but conscious. Soldiers immediately whisked him away as soon as the staff of sages was dismissed. Noble had given up hiding her ability to summon and dismiss memories, and thankfully in the chaos, no one seemed to care. Red and the woman lay on the ground, exhausted and in shock. Noble wished she could join them, but resting like that would bring her more pain than relief. Vera, a man and child, pushed through the crowd to surround the woman. A couple of soldiers joined Red to check on him as well. Noble backed away to give both groups some privacy. She was tired, but there was a lot of work to do. Floating back over the barrier, Noble hurried toward the palace where Sarai and Nickel waiting for her with General Theo. All 3 looked at her with anticipation. I saved 3 and lost 3, she said quickly, keeping to the facts. The creature down there is the one the saint fought in his nightmare. Because we saved most of the people in the city, it has gotten hungry early. Nickel and Sarai both took her words and digested them. Theo furrowed his brow. Noble understood why. He had no knowledge of nightmares or saints. The queen coughed lightly. General, the creature down there is a carnivorous flower. Each being it eats helps it grow a little stronger and reach a little higher. The barrier your men are making is good. Excellent work. Now, you must remain vigilant. Theo seemed to understand. We will keep going, Your Majesty, but most of the credit goes to Her Grace and Honorable Nickel. Noble looked at the other members of her cohort. The redhead was once again wearing her Mindweaver's tapestry over her battle gear, and the wraith beside her held a whip in his hand. Nickel shrugged. Fireshing convinced all the people to leave with her cloak. All I did was encourage the dissenters that it was in their best interest to go behind the barrier. You should have seen Laundry catch someone with his whip and pull them back. It was amazing. Sarai lowered her head. I'm sorry we couldn't stop everyone though. Me too. Noble smiled sadly. She had the best cohort. Without them, many more would have likely tumbled into the breach. Sensing that he was no longer needed, Theo bowed. I will go check on the status of everything and report back. Left alone, the 3 challengers of the nightmare looked at one another. I thought the tyrant was the obstacle. Sarai's anxiousness spiked. So did I, but I guess we tripped a bonus level. Noble shook her head at the irony. We will just have to beat it like we did all the rest. Can it even be done? You are the only one who can move around down there without getting Nickel shifted uncomfortably. The queen lifted her chin. We are a team. You took down Ender. Fire took the lead on the Lord of the Mountains. This one is mine, that's not to say I won't need your help. The other 2 looked at her attentively. Nick, can I borrow that weapon of yours? Noble held out her hand. Do you know how to use it? Nickel arched his brow as he transferred the whip into her soul sea. I'm a quick learner, the queen winked. What about me? Sarai pursed her lips. Keep doing what you are doing to deter people from jumping. Noble looked at the pile of glass by the palace as an idea formed in her head. Oh, and I might also need your fire for a moment. The fatigue from the previous battles that day melted away in the heat of a new enemy. The sun was heading toward the far horizon, and Noble and the others doubted her companions would be able to be quite so vigilant once darkness covered the land. Noble had seen the limbs of the flower grow with her own eyes after it consumed the human souls. While it wouldn't reach the top of the chasm for a long time, it would never be any weaker than it was now. That was why the saint had not been able to kill it in his nightmare. After feeding for months, the abomination was just too strong. The remnant of Crestfall had only been able to stop it from attacking. And he had lost the rest of his cohort in the process. Are you sure you want to do this? Nickel looked over the edge and shivered. Sarai nodded as she checked on the cooling glass. We can find another way. Thinking of the people who had fallen into the abyss, Noble clenched her fist. We cannot let that thing go on living while we stay up here and try to think of a better plan. I at least need to try. If it were only Noble by herself, she might have taken a step back to evaluate things from every angle. But fake or real, she was Queen of Crestfall and her heart couldn't let both her friends and subjects remain in danger. Even in the short time they had already spent, the flower had moved to a more direct attack. Knowing it could not influence the strong-willed, it had latched onto those with the weakest minds and filled them with unpleasant thoughts and questions. The soldiers had needed to restrain more than one person who tried to go over the barrier. Each time either Noble or Sarai was able to sever the hold using emotion or the Mindweaver's tapestry. Internally, Noble was also fighting. Don't you know you've already lost? Shouldn't the nightmare be over? Why is the spell doing this to you? Why after all you have done should you risk your life again? What will your friends do without your guidance? Have you really thought this through? Out of anger or revenge, the creature of the deep pummeled the floating queen with hurtful questions. But her confidence would not be shaken. All that means is I must be on the right track. Or it is afraid of what I can do. The queen suspected that the creature couldn't read fully her thoughts. How could it know what a nightmare was? No, it was likely triggering her own doubts and making her subconsciously fill in the blanks of its questions. Then, when it found a weakness, the monster latched on and offered the darkness of the abyss as the answer. It was the answer to her current problem, just not in the way the flower meant. Noble tugged at her armor and straightened her back. Is it ready? It could use a little longer to cool, but I think it will hold. Sarai's hands still felt warm from her hard work. Your Majesty. General Theo came up with a man pushing a wheelbarrow. The small cart was almost overflowing with full waterskins from the city. The men stopped with their cargo and bowed. Did you have any trouble? Noble could feel the tension from both men as they eyed the containers warily. We extracted as much as we could. I can attest to the fact that it is still an irritant. Theo held up his hands, which were covered in blisters. He frowned. Will the ooze from the beetles really make a difference with that flower? Noble gave him a bright smile. We will know soon enough. She looked at Nickel and Sarai. They wore confident expressions, but she could sense their real feelings. The queen tilted up her chin. All right, enough stalling. I will head out. I'll be back in a bit, hopefully with something shiny for my trouble. Best of luck. Sarai removed the bracelets and returned them to her friend. I know they don't have power anymore, but they brought us luck last time. Noble accepted the jewelry and tucked it under her armor. Thank you. I have mixed feelings about you killing that thing, Nickel said, glancing into the darkness. Noble's jaw dropped slightly. She prepared to jolt him with emotion when he gave a sly smile. I mean, it ate council, right? Nickel had indeed gotten confirmation of the kill, and he could only assume the flower had eaten his remains. Something that does that cannot be all bad. Smirking, the queen gave a small nod. You are right, I will make sure to thank it before letting it join Ender in the afterlife. That's all I'm asking, Nick winked. After a hug and final words from Sarai, Noble lifted all her cargo into the air except for the one tucked under her arm. Dozens of bags of beetle's juice hovered around her like a swarm of bees. She only hoped it would be enough to accomplish her goal. The queen waved regally to the others. I'll see you soon. With that, Noble dove with the waterskins following her like faithful drones. Once over the canyon, Noble relaxed and let gravity take its course. She was in a hurry, but she didn't want the flower to know that. If she didn't fight the forces around her, the queen hoped that the flower would assume she was just another one of its victims. As for the bags around her, she didn't need to protect all of them. Her goal was to hit the blossom with the poisonous irritant. It didn't matter if a few of them got broken as long as the bulk landed inside the mouth of the monster. Her goal was to kill it, but irritating it a little beforehand wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Before any of that, she had to get close enough to strike. That would take a lot of finesse and even more luck. There would only be one shot to catch the creature by surprise. Holding her hand behind her back, Noble kept Nickel's whip coiled tightly out of view. She simultaneously used her sorcery to speak the names of light and growing darker. While it wasn't the same as summoning darkness, the little bit of light around her dimmed, obscuring her presence. The queen wasn't sure if the plant could see, but she wasn't about to take any chances. At last, she could sense movement far below her. Using her second sight, Noble began to stare at the powerful being she was falling toward. Without the stress of trying to save other people, the queen got her first clear view of the strange, carnivorous flower. While she couldn't see the colors, she could feel the deep hatred pulsing through each vine and along the delicate, deadly petals of the bloom. While parts of it were clearly new from its recent growth spurts, its presence seemed as ancient as time. How long had it been trapped in the darkness? Was it once a noble creature that became corrupted? Or had it been born of vileness and only known destruction? There was no way of knowing. What Noble did know was now it was free. And its thirst was insatiable. Thankfully, Noble had brought it something to drink. Noble's eyes swirled with the thrill of battle. The amount of time it had taken for everyone to prepare and the meager meal brought out by Lenore had rejuvenated her. The monster kept telling her she was useless. She was determined to prove it wrong. But pretending to succumb to its invisible grip and actually succumbing was a very fine line. She needed to keep her body relaxed and her mind completely alert. Both were crucial to Noble's plan. As her free fall progressed, Noble continued to pick up speed. Seconds ticked by. As the heat grew and the air was tinged with noxious gas, Noble knew she was getting close. Her timing had to be perfect. Come close. Don't you know this is where you belonged all along? A small smile involuntarily formed on Noble's face. She planned to come very close. Feeling for each of the waterskins, Noble prepared to move them all at once. A rustling below let her know the vines were moving. Soon, she heard them moving through the darkness around her, like snakes ready to strike. But she didn't react to their presence, and they left her alone like they had the three that fell into the toothy center of the flower before. Getting closer, the waiting before action was the hardest part. Her muscles wanted to contract. To fight the lurking danger all around her. To cut down the enemy before it had the chance to strike. But Noble held still. 5, 4, 3, oh no. One of the containers splatted on a vine 2 seconds too early. The purple froth from the beetles spilled out somewhere to her left. It was a little more than a raindrop for the massive creature, but it was enough to alert the monster that something was amiss. It flicked the poison away, crashing its black tendril against the cavern wall. Tiny blisters formed on the inky surface of the vine. The canyon echoed with a roar. Treachery. The word burst on Noble's consciousness like a popped bubble. She was discovered. There was nothing she could do but spring into action. Her body suddenly ceased its fall as the remaining bags floated around her like buoys on the sea. The entire cavern burst to life as every limb of the flower suddenly had only one goal: apprehending the small floating woman. A massive arm came close to her head. Ducking, Noble let the vine chase her downwards towards her goal. To her right, she heard another splash and felt her telekinesis lose its hold on one of the water bladders. Another rumble from below let Noble know the poisonous juice had caused the flower more irritation. There was no reason to panic. Less packages meant she would have more control over the ones that were left. And she needed every ounce of clarity and control she could muster. The noxious fumes increased as the queen dove deeper into the den of the demonic flower. Keep going. Protecting the precious package tucked under her arm, Noble used Nickel's whip in her other hand to cut through the smaller tendrils that blocked her path. She maneuvered masterfully through the vines, aiming for open spaces and predicting the vines' movements, increasing and decreasing her speed to avoid collisions with the tiny spines lacing the tendrils. When a massive vine flew to block her path, she used the whip to lasso another to pull her out of the way in time. For now, her luck was holding. That wasn't to say things were going perfectly. The waterskins were being obliterated at frightening speed. At this rate, none of them would make it to the monster's mouth. Forget this. Throwing caution to the wind, Noble cut through 2 vines threatening to wrap her ankles and sent 2 of the water skins toward the gaping maw. They met their goal. The creature accepted the gift silently, not even bothering to shut its circular rows of teeth to chew. Good, the queen told herself, but a second voice inside her head mocked her. Don't you know it will take more than a little indigestion to stop a being so powerful? Why not provide yourself as a tasty meal instead? Noble ignored the blossom. The whip cracked in the darkness, trimming more branches from the oversized bush. Noble continued her assault. Now that the plant knew of her plan, it attacked the floating containers as well as the beautiful awakened. Noble used that to her advantage. Unlike the flower, she was used to dividing her attention in a battle. Through her second sight, she memorized the serpentine movement of the flower, mimicking it to keep herself and her cargo safe. Any other awakened would have died at least a dozen times while trying to outlast the angry black arms. Finally, her luck ran out. There were just too many vines and only one human. When the last of the waterskins broke on the monster's teeth, Noble's time was up. The vines circled around her in an inescapable cage. Shouldering the whip, Noble gritted her teeth. Darkness was all around her. From the void, a tendril wrapped around her torso, squeezing her like a python. Even through her armor, she could feel the needles ready to pierce her soft skin. Her chest began to burn as her ribs cracked. What little air was left in her lungs was tinged with sulfur and hotter than a fire. Noble was slowly being pulled downward. The voice of doubt in her head boomed triumphantly. Are cheap tricks all you have? Why bother? You are as worthless as you've always been. Don't you know you are only good at games like the Dreamscape? It's no wonder you brought balloons like a clown. Noble squirmed in the suffocating embrace. After all of its prodding, the creature had finally pushed her true worry to the front. She had unwillingly given up her greatest doubt to the monster below. The realization of her innermost insecurity was horrifying to face. Even after all she had been through, Noble still only thought of herself as the winner of a virtual reality game. A fake queen. She felt the invisible hook of the monster sink into her. Noble's body tensed. No. Just because she doubted her own value did not make her worthless. She was a loving mother to 4 amazing children, a brilliant professor at the academy, a valued consultant for the government, and a faithful wife to the most wonderful man in existence. If all of those people could see her worth, why couldn't she? In the past few months, Noble had helped refugees, helped defeat a gate, survived a Category 2 nightmare alone for weeks on end, and taken over a kingdom. Whatever had been thrown her way, she had fought tooth and nail to overcome. There would always be fears, worries and second-guessing. It was what she did with that anxiety that mattered. She would strive to be better and stronger. That is who Noble was. Her determination had helped bring down not 1, but 2 horrible monsters today alone. Noble's eyes swirled. About to be 3. You accuse me of cheap tricks. Those are for magicians and frauds. She rasped, no longer wishing to stay silent. If the creature wanted to taunt her, then she would taunt back. Keeping her hands above her head, Noble tried to measure her breaths to keep conscious. I am not a magician or a fraud, she continued. I am a warrior. At that moment, the unlikely end finished manifesting in front of her with the cracks that Ender had placed in the blade not fully healed. Using her aspect, Noble dug the tip into the vine and showered it with essence. A small part of the plant turned to dust. The branch recoiled, giving its prey enough room to slip from its grasp. Noble grabbed the estoc with her free hand to block another vine before a third caught her across her helmet. The needles flexed through the hole in her visor and scraped her cheek before she could pull away. Her face stung horribly, and she stabbed the offending black creeper with prejudice. It took the blade from her hand and she sent another burst of essence into the tip of the unlikely end. She continued to pour power into her cracked weapon. The cage around her wavered, providing the smallest hold toward freedom. Noble clung to her cargo and pressed through the tiny gap just in time. The spikes scraped against her armor, threatening to rip it from her body. Your memory has been destroyed. The earth rumbled with laughter. Are you sure you are a warrior? What soldier sacrifices their sword? It was a fair question. Noble shook her head. A weapon was only as good as the one who wielded it. And a warrior could fight with more than just a blade. Another rain of sparks manifested in the air beside her. At the same time, Noble released the package in her hands. As the lucent taper lit in the darkness, Noble released the container from her arms. Its brown surface glistened momentarily before falling away from the floating candle. Shutting her eyes, Noble used her sorcery to enhance the candle in the oppressive darkness. She spoke the names of light and getting brighter with what was left of her voice. The words came out as little more than a croak, but she meant them with all of her being. The candle shone with incandescent radiance, pushing back the darkness and shadows until only brightness remained around Noble. The fiendish plant soaked in the light, growing still over the sudden change. The package fell into the center of the bloom, bypassing the teeth of the abomination entirely. Just before it passed into the wide chasm of the creature's stem-like throat, a whip cracked the air and with it, the fragile outer shell of the precious parcel. The broken gift and its contents slid down into the flower before the light faded. "Is that all you have? One final drink for me to wash down your bones?" Noble gasped. Her lungs were on the verge of collapsing from the noxious air and the cracked ribs in her chest. "Stay, conscious." Dismissing the candle, Noble hid in the darkness. But the plant didn't need eyes to see her. It only needed arms to grab her. They twisted in the air around her, braiding to make a cage once more. The blossom would not make the same mistake twice. "Don't you realize that this is the end? Isn't the pain overwhelming? Give in to sleep. Give in too." The thought abruptly stopped. The black vines shivered. Treachery. Noble smiled. The flower had expected her final projectile to be the same as all the others, a container of mildly irritating beetle juice. Even the cracking glass had not given it pause. Which is exactly what Noble had hoped when she broke the bottle over its mouth. Instead of another waterskin, the package was a bottle. Using Sarai's magical fire, it had been hastily formed from the palace's stained glass window and filled with bubbling black liquid. The pink and green glass of the original masterpiece swirled together under the baker's blaze to form a shade of brown. The color was what had inspired Noble to use the waterskins as a distraction. The misdirection had worked. It wasn't until the council's poison was deep in the flower's roots that the creature realized something was wrong. By then it was too late. The earth shook violently, sending shards of obsidian rock tumbling down from the canyon walls. The black bloom was dying, but not fast enough. Beyond Noble's desire to have the task completed, she was very short on air. The vines around her were tightly packed, making a hasty escape impossible. Think. Noble could feel uncontrolled rage mixed with agonizing pain coming from her victim. She focused, searching for any sign of weakness. Just when she had given up hope, something moved out of the large mouth. It was long and thin, like the pistil of a lily. The creature knew it was close to the end, so it was going to release a seed. "No, you don't." Pulling the whip from around her body, Noble lowered herself to the level of the stalk. The smell of rotting vegetation mixed with sulfur was too much. Noble was forced to hold her breath. Twisted her wrist, she unrolled the long whip. Noble hadn't asked for this memory on a whim. It was one of the few objects Nickel had let the professor study in great detail. The Willbreaker was a high-tier weapon with more than one insidious enchantment. However, only one of them interested her just now. Since Nickel had temporarily transferred ownership, she could fully make use of the powerful weapon. Flicking her arm, the queen activated Reckoning. The wind around her shifted, following the lash in its wicked arc. With the crack, an obliterating current sliced through the air, sharper than any blade. Following up with a reverse motion, a second snap almost immediately followed the first. That was all the energy she had before she was forced to drop her arm. The two cuts by the Willbreaker crossed the pistil with enough obliterating force to carve a new cavern in onyx rock. Instead, they dissected the fragile tube, cracking the row of teeth just beyond the base for good measure. Blood poured into the mouth of the creature and began to fill the opening. A gurgling sound caused the blood to bubble, but Noble couldn't see. She was too busy trying to remain lucid. The queen had been holding her breath for too long, she needed air. In response to the sudden blood loss, the braided vine began to uncoil the cage it had formed. Feeling a draft, Noble instinctively raced toward the hole. And not a moment too soon. She felt the heat of the open air and took in what breath she could. Noble screamed in pain. Her battered armor was pressing into her sides, aggravating the injuries to her chest. She continued upward, trying to cleanse her lungs. Another sound joined painful screams, the final hiss of the flower collapsing before its blood spilled out over the ground. Below her, the snaking vines suddenly lost their tension, crashing to the ground in a useless heap. You have slain a fallen terror, bloom of doubt. You have received a memory. Noble lost some of her composure with the news. She had done it. Sure, the bloom of doubt had been starved for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, but still, she had defeated it with a final use of Ender's poison and the assistance of Nickel's weapon. The menace was dead. That didn't mean her job was over. In fact, the most important part of her plan was just beginning. I'll be up in a few. Noble sent a message upward, hoping it would reach the top. Taking a deep breath, the queen checked on her fire charm before dipping down once more. If not for the little trinket, being in the deep would be unbearable. Summoning her candle, Noble was both disgusted and relieved by what she saw. The flower had folded back over its stem, peeling like a banana. The rotten flesh was melting away and turning into bubbling black liquid, just like the victims before it. The only reason the stem remained upright was the soul shards contained within. They were still intact, for now. And Noble needed to keep it that way. Circulating what was left of her essence, Noble went to work. She used the Willbreaker's Reckoning enchantment to cut away the weakened flesh and release the precious shards. It was tedious work, but Noble needed to work as precisely as she did expediently. 1, 2, 3, 4. The freed shards floated around Noble's body, reflecting the hovering candle's light. Noble frowned. She needed to work faster. The shards were resistant to the poison but not immune. The bottom one in particular was in danger of succumbing to the rot before she could retrieve it. Cracking in the ground accompanied the next crack of the whip. When the fifth soul shard was released from its host, the rest of the stem collapsed along with the final shard. The queen's heart sank. Then it filled with dread as the earth continued to rumble. She took her lute and raced upward. There was not a moment to lose. Hot gas shot up from the ground and filled the air with more noxious fumes. The plant-eating poison was also a consumer of earth. It had finally worked its way through the bloom's roots and deep into the obsidian stone. And to the molten lava underneath. Noble's eyes opened wide. Blazing bee. Sarai paced along the edge of the cliff with her hands behind her back. Are you sure it was Noble's voice you heard and not the monster trying to give you false hope? Nickel sat on a fallen piece of stone with a single dagger in his right hand. He lowered the wood that he was carving and gave the beautiful redhead a long-suffering look. I'm sure it was Noble. The critter down there wants to take away hope, not give it. Anyway, the intrusive thoughts have stopped. Either Noble killed it or she wounded it bad enough that it stopped attacking us. Nickel's voice trailed off. Even though she was looking at him, Sarai was distracted. He sighed and returned to chipping away at the wood he was holding. Women. After glancing at the barrier to make sure no other victims needed saving, Sarai returned to her pacing. Eventually, she let out an exasperated sigh. This is taking too long. Give me the memory and I will try talking to her myself. The lady paused and held out her hand. Nickel raised one eyebrow at her. Even if I did, you wouldn't be able to do anything. Her Majesty is out of range. And if by some miracle your words did reach down there, you would only be a distraction. The man in black began whittling more intensely. Sarai's expression softened. You've already been trying to reach her, haven't you? Only 10 times. Nickel defended himself. He winced. 11 times now. No response. Pressing her lips together, Sarai peered over the edge. Was it her imagination or had the air gotten warmer? I am giving her another 5 minutes and then I am going after her. Crossing her arms, Sarai dared her companion to deny her. He grunted. I'll come with you. Their thoughts were cut short as the ground rumbled. That hadn't happened since before Noble's only message from the deep. Is it still alive? Sarai squinted to look as if she could discern something new. And surprisingly she could. A small, almost imperceptible light pierced through the darkness. Laundry. Sarai said, "Look." Nickel leaned over the edge and then his eyes opened wide. With his lightning-fast reflexes, he took Sarai by the waist with one arm and pulled her away from the edge. "Get back." The words barely left his mouth when a cloud of steam and smoke shot up from the canyon. Ash immediately followed the burst of hot air, drifting down like black snow over the crevice. Sarai moved away from Nickel despite his protest. "I have a fire aspect, remember." The redhead strode forward, desperate to find any sign of her friend. But what she found when looking over the edge was not a fearsome queen. It was a rising river of lava. "Noble." Sarai covered her mouth. They were fairly certain that the poison would eat away at the earth if it managed to kill the ferocious flower, but Noble had been more worried about saving the soul shards before the vile liquid consumed them. It had never occurred to them that they might release a volcano. Those were reserved for the mountains, not here. In hindsight, Sarai felt like she should have seen it coming. But it did no good to lament the miscalculation now. "The lava is coming up quickly," she told Nickel as calmly as she could. Despite the vast size and length of the valley, the magma was pushing up from the earth with enough speed to cause the molten fire to flow through the canyon and continue to rise. Standing back from the edge, Nickel shielded his eyes from the heat. The wood in his hand seemed ready to catch fire from the temperature alone. "Do we need to evacuate?" By we, Nickel meant himself and Sarai. There would be no way to save the people of Crestfall if the lava entered the city. The redhead didn't answer immediately. She wasn't about to leave, and it turned out there was no need. As soon as the molten rock rose above the solid obsidian walls, its progress stalled. The first set of tunnels deep below the city opened like thirsty mouths. They drank in the lava greedily. The flow slowed, eventually reaching its height before leveling out and receding slightly. Sarai continued to watch. "Are we safe?" Nickel asked again when the redhead did not answer him. "Two of us are." Sarai wiped her face with her finger and thumb. "But Noble." Just then, a black dot appeared above the overwhelming light of the molten rock. No, 6 black dots. It was impossible to tell what they were at first, but as they grew bigger there was no denying that something was rising above the lava. At last, a battered Noble breached the surface like a bullet from a gun. Her armor was battered and missing in places, but she was alive. "Noble." Sarai waited for the queen to descend before wrapping her in a hug. Noble screamed in pain. "Broken ribs, maybe, more," she rasped. Sarai loosened her grip but did not let go. She draped the Mindweaver's tapestry around them to block Noble's injuries from prying eyes. The man with them shook his head. You made it, Noble." "Late as usual, but I suppose that is who you are now." Nickel clicked his tongue, but Noble could feel his relief wash over her. He did care. She smiled at him weakly. Better late than never. Around the queen and Sarai, soul shards slowly lowered to the ground. They were warm with the heat of the canyon but otherwise unharmed. "I only got 5. That will have to be enough." Noble coughed. "You need to rest." Sarai called toward the barricade for water and a healer. "We need to finish this." Contrary to her words, Noble melted into her friend's embrace. A few moments later, water, tonic, and Bramwell appeared beyond the barrier walking toward them. The healer's walk was slow and awkward. He looked even older than he had 2 months ago when they first met. Sarai reluctantly released her friend for treatment. Noble accepted the water and tonic but refused his help. "You will kill yourself." "I know my limit, Your Majesty." Bramwell gingerly removed the woman's helmet and saw the scratches down her face. They were deep and possibly infected, but the tip of his finger made them disappear. His arm clasped her firmly on the shoulder and Noble felt her bones being knit together. Her awakened body had already begun that process, but the gentle nudgings of the man before her sped the repair considerably. New wrinkles appeared on Bramwell's face, yet he was smiling. Taking a deep breath for the first time in an hour, Noble removed the healer's hand. "That is enough. Thank you." But Bramwell realized who he was speaking to and stopped. "Yes, Your Majesty." Noble summoned the loyal tabard before dismissing her armor underneath. She felt much better. Smiling at the other two members of her cohort, Noble nodded. How are things up here? Same as you left them. Broken and nightmarish. Nickel lifted his hands to indicate the destroyed city and dead creatures. What's that in your hand? Noble furrowed her brow. My dagger, it's a weapon. The man rolled his eyes. When he could see that his sarcasm would not let him off the hook, he sighed and held out the carving. It looked like an animal mid-leap. It's supposed to be cozy. Nickel looked away. Noble, too, glanced to where the glass and Simkus had once been. Now the only things left behind were the creatures who had tried to take a bite out of him and died when a drop of the poison barely touched their mouths. Noble took the carving in her hand and stroked it gently. If not for Kosi's intervention, we would have used the poison on the tyrant instead of the terror. He saved us one last time. Handing back the small statue, Noble's mouth formed a determined line. She would make Kosi proud. Looking toward the broken palace, Noble gave a firm nod. Come on, let's end this nightmare once and for all. In the darkness of the evening, Theo's men faithfully cleared a path through the palace. With the soldiers carefully transporting the 5 large shards, it was slow going, especially by lamplight. Most of the castle was still standing, but the tyrant's breaking of the uppermost towers and the many earthquakes had left the building in disarray. Caution was key. They didn't want to risk the building collapsing when they were so close to their goal. Noble let the soldiers do their work. She was done leading the way just now. There was something more pressing on her mind. While they made their way through the halls, the queen imparted as much wisdom as she could to Theo. You are in charge while I am gone, she told him. Do what is best for the kingdom. Noble was pretty sure that nothing would exist once the nightmare ended. But just in case she wanted to leave a plan in place. I will keep Crestfall safe until you return, Theo assured her. Here's a list of troublemakers in the city. Nickel passed over a list of names. You may want to have these arrested or at least thrown out of the kingdom. They have been trying to kill Her Grace almost non-stop. What? Sarai, who was leading the group, turned around in shock, tripping over a loose rock. Nickel rolled his eyes. Don't worry. You survived, didn't you? Sarai puffed out her cheeks. She had no retort. The rest of the instructions were hastily given before the group reached the underground arena. Plans for food and water rationing, rebuilding, and even what to do with prisoners who survived in the dungeon. Put them to work as the ditch diggers and have them run new plumbing lines. If this works, it's all pointless, Nickel reminded her through the other's voice. They all died thousands of years ago. And yet you handed over a list of traitors to Theo. Noble rolled her eyes internally. And what do you mean if? It will work. Aloud, she gave her final royal edicts. You will need to block off this entrance. Fill it with stone and make it look like the rest of the castle. Once we go in, don't let anyone enter ever again. Thank you for your service, the queen said to the general as they came to the stairs. Understood, your majesty. We will guard from here. Theo ordered his soldiers to stand at intervals along the wall. It's clear, Sarai announced from the arena. The fire on the end of her spear flicked uncertain light across her face. Noble addressed the men holding the terror's soul shards. We'll take them from here. After Nickel and the queen each took one directly, the other 3 floated into the air on their own. Carefully, Noble maneuvered the floating shards into the passageway. Best of luck, Theo gave one last bow. We await your return, your majesty. Unwilling to agree or disagree, Noble simply dipped her head. Be well, general. With Sarai's spear torch to guide them, the 3 entered the dark arena. Without the enchantment, it sat silent as a tomb. The world went black for a moment as Sarai used her torch to pry open the stone door. Before it had only been wide enough for a human. Now, the precious cargo would be able to get through as well. Are you certain I can't just crush one of these? Nickel asked idly. Pretty sure that would saturate my core. Noble thought about it for a moment and shook her head. We cannot chance it. When we get home, I'll find a way to make sure you get all the shards you need. Nick grunted. You better. Noble summoned the breadcrumbs and passed it to Sarai. With it as their guide, they moved confidently but carefully forward. In all the shaking, only one of the tunnels had collapsed, but it took both Sarai and Nickel a considerable amount of time to clear the rubble. Noble would have helped, but she was tasked with keeping all their cargo safe instead. It was a good thing too. For as soon as they passed under the cleared space, the passage sealed once more with new debris. That's unfortunate. Noble tried not to show her worry at how close she had come to being crushed. At least they weren't planning on going back to the surface. This was a one-way trip. Or so they hoped. The lower they got, the warmer the air became. Are you sure that the lava didn't make it into the chamber? Nickel asked, wiping his brow. Sarai chewed her lip. I don't think so, but I'm also not positive that the place we are going didn't fall into the abyss with half of Crestfall. It didn't, Noble answered confidently. I have seen it before in the Dream Realm. It houses the gate in Ender's Deep. The other two seemed only slightly surprised by the news. When Noble had told them of their location before the battle, she hadn't explained in depth. That piece of information made her revelation make more sense. Noble wished she had seen the signs sooner, but at least she hadn't missed them altogether. We're here, Sarai slowed down as they entered the chamber. Although it was night, Noble could see a bit of light coming from her left. It was either the glow from the cooling lava below or somehow the starlight was reaching down from above. Either way, the edge of the heart's chamber was only half of what it had once been. The tablets. Nickel sounded just a little too eager. Sarai pointed and his eyes lit with interest. Give me 5 minutes. It will probably take a few more than that to get set up, Noble dipped her head. She could do the work faster, but they only had one chance and she wanted to do it right. A little extra time would let her focus fully on her task. The man in black raced through the jagged teeth of the cavern to the far side. He called forth a memory that resembled a flashlight and read feverishly. Meanwhile, Sarai led her friend and the shards through the perilous path to the vertebrae near the center. Noble was even more certain that the rocks around her were actually ancient bones. Hitting one of the shards against the razor-sharp teeth might crack it. So they were careful to pick the widest path to the center. At last, they reached their goal. What do you need from me? Sarai took a deep breath. I need you to keep the light bright and steady while I measure this circle. Noble used her hovering feet to mark off the distance around the pedestal, then placed each shard an equal distance apart around the circumference. This step might not be necessary, but I want everything to be perfect. A short while later, Nickel returned with a rubbing of some of the tablets in his hand. Noble could see the runes marked out in the dim light. Well, the queen looked at him expectantly. It is as you suspected. The runes are not a complete circle. They repeat to make 2 halves. So as long as the runes on the northern part of the kingdom are not too damaged, that part of the array should still function. The librarian rolled up his paper tightly and handed it to the redhead. Put this in your memory so it gets back home, please, he added belatedly. Sarai nodded and added the small paper to the keepsake. It barely fit alongside Noble's ring and the swatch of fabric from Amira's dress. The beautiful baker sent the memory back into her soul sea. Are you ready? Noble asked them both. She felt their emotions spike, but they nodded. It was time. There was only one thing missing. The portcullis key. Noble took a deep breath, held out her hand, and summoned the memory at the center of this entire nightmare. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.